Matt, I'm turning the mics on here.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, Eleanor. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I just want to make, okay.
Just making sure we have a quorum before I take roll call, and it looks like we do. Okay, good evening, everyone who's watching, listening. Apologize, we're a little bit late here, about 7 minutes late. We were in closed session since 4:30 and just went a little bit over, so our apologies. With that, I'll take a roll call returning from closed session.
Councilmember Nierenheim.
Here.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Here.
Councilmember Horvath.
Here.
Councilmember Grand.
Here.
Councilmember MD.
Here.
Mayor Brand.
Here. Thank you, Eleanor. Joe or anyone, is there any announcements from closed session actions?
There's no reportable action from closed session.
Okay, great. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn to a regular meeting.
So moved. Second.
There's a motion by Councilmember Grand, seconded by Councilmember Nierenheim. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, I'll take a roll call vote, just so everybody's tuning in, so you know we're taking roll call votes even on these simple matters because of the way we have to conduct the meetings. So, Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grand.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Okay, great. So we're adjourned from the closed session back to regular meeting. And now I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the City Council. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Nierenheim.
Here.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Here.
Councilmember Horvath.
Here.
Councilmember Grand.
Here.
Councilmember MD.
Here.
Mayor Brand.
Here. And since we have a flag here, why don't we all rise and salute the flag? And ready? Begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. All right. Taking a moment of silence. Announcements. Councilmember Nierenheim, do you have any announcements?
I have my community meeting this Saturday. I will be sending out the invitation and exact date and time with the invitation for this Saturday. Online Zoom. We're still not doing gatherings more than 10 people, so we'll play it safe. Maybe next month, but I want to thank everyone for going to my emergency special meeting last week. It was great. We had a lot of stuff last week that we talked about. So that's it. That's all I have.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Horvath.
Yeah, I'll be hosting a town hall tomorrow night. If anyone is interested in attending, you can find the information on social media. Or you can just contact me directly. It'll be a discussion, honest conversation around police enforcement, race relations, and our local community engagement.
Okay, great. Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. Yes, I will be having my community meeting this Saturday as well at 10 a.m. The emails and invites will be going out. Special guest will be Chief Keith Kaufman, and we'll be discussing all of the things that are going on these days.
Okay, Councilmember MD.
We had a neighborhood protest in North Redondo in the bike path, and it was done by a resident, and she did a really good job. She organized it. It was, if I was to estimate, around 125, 150 people. Very well done. Also, we're having U.S. postal problems again. And so I've sent out to all my constituents about how to contact Janet Turner from Ted Lieu's office. And so if any of you have heard of even just one, if you could send that back out so that we can kind of have a whole bunch of us complaining at once so that we can get something fixed. And then I'm also pushing out Horvath's meeting because he's got a big panel there to help discuss the issues that are going on.
That's great. And that's tomorrow night at what time?
7 to 9 p.m.
7 to 9 p.m. Great. I want to thank Chief Kaufman. I had a Facebook Live Zoom meeting. Actually, it was Zoomed, but it wasn't open, but it was broadcast Facebook Live. And I really appreciate the Chief coming on and helping explain, how Redondo Beach fits into all that's been going on. And it was great to have that kind of community engagement and be speaking directly with our Chief of Police. I think it helps build awareness, build confidence, and demonstrate that what everyone witnessed in Minneapolis was nothing of any sort of policy that really any police department could find would be carried out. So, and likewise, I spoke with many of our officers, and what they witnessed was absolutely atrocious, and nothing that would be used here in Redondo. So, or be carried out. The man was handcuffed on the ground. That was the end of it. And then it all unfolded before everyone. It's horrible. Anyway, thanks for Chief Kaufman making yourself so available at all these meetings. It really, really helps. I sent a couple letters to Dr. Ferrer, Director of Los Angeles County Department of Health, the last couple days. One was to relax some of the beach restrictions. Been meeting with these beach cities mayors almost weekly, and we're asking for further relaxations of some of the, sports and organized sports, sunbathing, that sort of thing. A lot of things are already going on. So hopefully we'll get an answer back soon, and we'll move forward with that. I also sent a letter asking for soft reopening of massage studios and esthetician practices under certain guidelines. So I want to thank Minnie Zuliger down in Riviera Village with, God, the name's escaping me right now. Anyway, they have a business there, and they sent very specific guidelines of how they could reopen safely. So I sent those letter off to Dr. Ferrer, so hopefully we'll get an answer back quickly. And as Councilmember Imdy said, I want to thank all the protesters. We've had protests in several areas in Redondo Beach, and they've been protests, what they're supposed to be. And so really, really appreciate people's enthusiasm and peaceful protesting, which is what really this country's founded on. So that's all to be continued, as we know. So with that, we'll move on to approval of order of agenda tonight. Is there anyone who'd like to make a motion to approve or make changes to our order of agenda?
I'd like to move item L1 behind P2, so essentially do L1 as the last item. The other items are all pretty quick and small. The way I could see this going is we spend a lot of time on the budget item, and we get really tired, and we just end up powering through and not giving the other items their due diligence. So I would be in favor of moving L1 to hop behind P2.
Okay, is that a motion?
That's a motion, yes.
I'll second that.
Okay, so there's a motion to move L1 after P2, basically before mayor and council referrals to staff. Okay, any discussion? Okay, I'll do a roll call vote. Councilmember Nierenheim?
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein?
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath?
Aye.
Councilmember Gran?
Aye.
Councilmember Imdy?
Aye.
Okay, well, there you go. It's probably a good move. I didn't think of that, but yeah, so it's because these other items should go fairly quickly. So with that, we have an order of agenda. No agency recesses tonight. We have some blue folder items. I think we have an item for J1, item for L1, item for P1 and P2. Am I missing any others? Anybody? Joe, City Clerk, is that it?
Yeah, you received a later one at 4, which was for L1, just to make sure you have that in your email.
Okay. So there's
Motion
two
to
items
receive
for L1.
They were the budget response report listing and the budget response report 1B and number 21 through 25, just so you have it on your either in your emails.
Right. Some additional budget response reports that we didn't have.
Motion to receive and file.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Gran.
Aye.
And Councilmember Imdy.
Aye.
Great. Thank you. So moving right along to the consent calendar. Tonight, we only have 6 items on the consent calendar. Any of these items can be pulled by a council member. Anyone can comment on any of these items. I'll go through the council, see if any item they want to pull any item. Councilmember Narenheim, is any item you'd like to pull?
There's none. Thank you.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Horvath.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Grant.
No, thank you.
And Councilmember MD.
No, thank you.
Okay, so none of the items were suggested to be pulled, but are there any comments from the public on any of these consent calendar items?
Vicky, do we have? We have none, Mayor.
We have none. Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent calendar.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Horvath, seconded by Councilmember Narenheim. Councilmember Narenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grand.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Okay, is there anything you need to read?
Yes,
Ellen?
Mayor, yes. H5, adopt by 4/5 vote and by title only resolution number CC-2006-041, a resolution of City Council City of Redondo Beach, California, modifying the budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 to appropriating $39,318 in Bureau of Justice Assistance fiscal year 2020 coronavirus emergency supplemental funding program, and for H6, adopt by 4/5 vote and by title only resolution number CC-206-042, a resolution of the City Council City of Redondo Beach, California, modifying the budget for fiscal year 2019-2020 to appropriate $12,203 in Edward Bryan Memorial Justice Assistant Grant Program funds. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay, thank you, Eleanor. So, moving right along. Public participation on non-agenda items. This is the opportunity for the public to comment on anything that is not already on the agenda. Eleanor, do you have any comments from the public under non-agenda items?
Yes, we have one public comment.
Can you read it, please?
The communication comes from Matthew Hensley. Good evening, Mayor Brand, City Council members, and staff. My comment this evening is about the previously scheduled strategic plan that was rightfully replaced with the budget summit meeting due to the impacts of COVID-19 on next year's budget. Before this unprecedented time in history, there were several items planned for the 2020 spring strategic plan. I would like to know when the strategic plan will be held and request 2 specific topics be discussed and acted upon. Last year, I had brought up that the city, although previously discussed in January 2018, had yet to adopt any official parliamentary procedure for the council and the commissions. To date, nothing has been officially adopted, and this leads to unclear motions, excessive dialogue, in my opinion, and overall a less efficient meeting that relies on the city attorney to instruct on loosely adopted Robert's rules. Additionally, the city does not have a clear policy for public hearing ex parte communication disclosures for the city council or commissioners. This lack of clarity could eventually lead to a legal risk should someone want to exploit this potential hole in the city's policies. Currently, by historical norms, ex parte is disclosing who you spoke to, but I believe the essence of ex parte is more what did you learn and what data was used to judge in a public hearing, and ensuring every one of the council members / commissioners has the same information. For ex parte, this has led staff to directly recommend to commissioners not to speak to any other commissioners in advance of a public hearing, which is not specifically the rule of either ex parte or the Brown Act, which are often overlapping or erroneously discussed in place of the other. I kindly ask that in the next strategic plan, whenever that may be, these 2 topics, adopting some official procedural rules and adopting an ex parte policy, be taken up to provide clarity for the residents, the city council, and the commissioners to reduce the future risk of a procedural or ex parte lawsuit issue that may arise due to a lack of an official policy. Thank you, Matthew Hensley from District 3. I'm going to refresh really quick just to make sure we don't have any new ones.
Sure.
Thank you. I think we're good.
Okay.
Yes,
Well, thank you.
you're welcome.
All right, so we're moving to our regular agenda. We moved L1 to after P2, so we'll move right on to M1. M1, discussion on possible action regarding video conferencing for city council and commission meetings, and update on main library council and chamber audiovisual and broadcast upgrades. Eleanor.
Actually, I'm going to defer it to Chris right now.
Okay, Chris Benson.
Sure. I'll get to the broadcast upgrade, I guess, after we discuss. Council really has a choice to make about what they want to use for audio, video conferencing. Currently using Zoom, and we can continue on that path. And if the city clerk wants to, and the council wants to add public participation via Zoom, or we can, investigate other options, other platforms. Most everybody knows Zoom right now. The council's used to using Zoom, but we're open. We can support whatever platform the council chooses, whatever platform we can already integrate it into the council chambers as far as broadcast capability. So we're kind of, open to discussion as to where the council would like to go.
I'm sorry, Chris, are you waiting for?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. So, we can take questions on the use of Zoom. If the council decides to use Zoom, we'll work with the city clerk's office. We'll get an IT staff member to work on the process flow. We'll go through testing, training, testing, before it's actually used.
Okay, great. I'll just go straight to Councilmember Horvath.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with continuing with Zoom. We've been using it here at the COG. It's become quite comfortable, I think, for some of us. If staff has reasons to think that we should move away from Zoom, or if we have any problems, I'm fine with that as well. I trust the judgment from a security perspective. I would just recommend that we try to ensure that we follow any protocols or best practices that we see being done by other agencies. The mayor and I, Councilmember Lowenstein, have mentioned the water board. There are other agencies that have figured out a way to do it. I'm sure, we don't have to reinvent the wheel, but if we figure out who's using it and using it well, especially as it relates to public comment, then hopefully we'll get ahead of the game here and back on track. That's all.
Okay, Councilmember Nierenheim.
Thank you, Mayor Brand. I don't think necessarily we have to go down the path of Zoom. If it doesn't fit all the check marks, we should get a platform that works best for us. So as long as it works best for us in the council chambers, with using the platform with the city clerk's office, there's plenty of other platforms such as Adobe Webinar, which is made for webinars with hundreds of users. If we get an item with 300, 400, 500 users, can Zoom support that? 400 users, 500 users? Chris, you know that?
The webinar product is designed to support a large number of users. Yes, quite expensive. I don't know the exact number off the top of my head.
Okay, so that's the scalability is the biggest thing that I'd be concerned about. Once we get an item that is massive in scope, and again, allowing people to register is important. Transparency is important. Like giving people their 3 minutes of time is important. We can only control so much with making sure they are who they are. And if they put in fake information, that's their deal. But we should be able to fully control the environment that they're in, and have the city clerk, when the mayor requests, to shut that person off if something is deemed offensive or disruptive to the meeting. So those would be my concerns. Otherwise, I'm fine with Zoom for use of the public. These public meetings, and if somebody wants to steal the meeting, they can steal the meeting. It's public, so they can put it on YouTube. It's like it is already on YouTube. So I'm fine with that.
Okay. Actually, I think people can be offensive, but they can't disrupt the meeting. So anyway, is that it, Councilmember? Councilmember MD.
I agree with Mr. Nierenheim. I'm open to other forums. It doesn't have to be Zoom, but just as long as all the check marks are done, I'm okay with it. I'm flexible with what format you use, as long as we are able to do all the things that he said. I won't repeat them all.
Okay. You're hearing that question twice now. Do you feel that Zoom can meet the, I mean, for now, we can always change the platform, but for now, do you feel like Zoom can meet the requirements that you've heard?
Yeah, I do. I think we can follow. There's a lot of best practice from not only other agencies, but also from Zoom itself in terms of setting up and controlling meetings. Like you said, if it does end up not working, we can always shift the platform. But what I'm reading so far is that we should be able to control, the participation at a level where, once a person is live in the meeting and speaking, you don't know what's going to happen. But up to that point, as far as registering users to speak, there is a process that's outlined, that we can follow.
Okay, so if we, give you the direction to go ahead and use Zoom, what meeting you project it would first be used where people can call in and participate?
I'm going to defer to the city clerk on that because it's going to require additional staff, monitoring and doing some work to make that happen. And even working with the city clerk during a meeting to, put people in, from the wait list into the meeting.
Yeah, so,
Okay.
so, I can see probably July 7th. I mean, maybe we can try it then, and, because I'm going to be working with IT to make sure we have everything set up now that we know what platform we can go ahead and get started on. It's going to take time for our, Vicky and I and probably another staff person, just so we have a backup. But I don't see a problem. I'm thinking July 7th, if that works out for IT. We'll try that.
Okay.
Yeah, we can shoot for July 7th.
And would this also be something that would be used with commissions?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
And we expect to be starting the commission meetings back up in July, I guess.
Right. But I don't know if we'll start with them right after that. We'll probably do the planning and the harbor and budget and finance, since we've already got them started on Granicus. And then we'll start moving the others after that.
Okay. Yeah, a lot of the commissions haven't met in a long time.
Yep.
Like all of them, except budget, finance, harbor, and planning.
Yeah, so now that the council chambers is rewired, this will make it a lot easier. Because, I also want to see, more public participation. And I want to see that. Been waiting for it also.
Well, it might be good to, I noticed, I think Recreation Parks meets the first Wednesday of every month, so maybe test it out with them on July 1st as an example. I don't know. Something to consider. Might be better to test it out on commission than,
Okay.
something to consider.
Well, we're going to try to, test it out as much as we can before the council meeting.
Councilmember Grant.
Sure. Based on the conversation here, I'd like to make a motion to authorize IT and the clerks to proceed with Zoom and see if we can be up and running for the July 7th meeting.
Mm-hmm. Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay, motion by Councilmember Grant, seconded by Councilmember Horvath. Is that it, Joan?
Yeah, that's it.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, I'm with Zoom as well too. I think a lot of people already downloaded it for the computer, so they won't be forced to download another application. But I would say if it doesn't work, we look at something like Microsoft Teams or Blue Jeans and one of the other conferences. So I'm good with Zoom. That's it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Anybody? Okay, with that, I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
Apologize. Any public comments on this item?
No comments, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grand.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Okay, great. Well, there you go. On Zoom, July 7th. We'll give it a try. Okay.
So the other part of I'm sorry, Mayor.
Yes, go ahead.
So the other part of the item is an update on the council chamber upgrades.
Oh.
So a little bit of history. The last time the physical council chambers were upgraded was 2009. And that at the time was also a major upgrade. I mean, complete forklift replacement of everything was there with new equipment. The library was not upgraded at that time. The library had AV broadcast equipment installed when it was built. So that equipment it goes back to 1995, but it was not touched during the 2009 upgrade. In fall of 2017, the council chamber and main library AV broadcast infrastructure design process began. And in February 2019, project approval was received to move forward. When we moved forward, we included the main library in those upgrades because we knew that council was going to have to move out of the chambers physically while the work was done. And the upgrade that's going to take place is a complete replacement of what's there now. It's another forklift upgrade of all the equipment. And you're really going from a complex signal path of cables and AV signals to more of a networked infrastructure for AV and broadcast. The idea was that the library would go first so that the council could relocate there while the work was done on the council chambers. So that's what we did. And the library would be a fully functional broadcast center, which it is. We're about 95% complete on that project. Back in December 2019, we were getting ready to go through some initial software installs, some testing and training about mid-March. And of course, in mid-March, we had the coronavirus and the COVID-19 pandemic. I also had an IT staffing shortage at the time, so we really didn't get to move forward at that point. The room also right now is being used as a EOC during the COVID pandemic. Initially, the physical improvements were to be completed by April 2020 in the main council chambers. We were supposed to be operating out of the library right now. Originally, the scope of the project was for the seats and the carpet to be replaced. And so when our original design was focused around that change, as the project went on, it kind of morphed into a complete physical infrastructure upgrade in the council chambers, which includes leveling out the floor where the seats are, complete replacement and redesign of the dais, and also that whole area where the dais sits is all being completely redone to meet ADA requirements. So what we've had to do is actually go through another redesign of how we're handling the equipment at the dais. So we're doing that right now. So with that, with what I'm hearing is they're estimating to start the physical work on the council chambers in August 2020, which will put us in probably late spring for an actual start to the technical and AV broadcast upgrades in the council chambers. So it puts it out quite a ways. In the meantime, if the council does chambers does open back up, the library will be fully functional by the time we do that. Our goal is to have that up and operational before August, in case we do actually hold physical meetings in the library. But we do have some work to do there still before we can make that happen. The recent improvements to the council chamber were the integration of video conferencing, the streaming to social media platform right now, YouTube, and audio conference, which the council approved under consent tonight, which will be integrated into the council chambers in the next 4 to 5 weeks. That technology will also have to be relocated over to the library before August. So there's still quite a bit of work to do, but it's almost there. We've been having a lot of problems with the equipment in the council chambers the last year. There've been a lot of equipment failures. Even we were doing the upgrades for the audio conferencing and video conferencing integration. We had equipment fail that we had to get a replacement for. Luckily, we found it. So the council chamber infrastructure is definitely on its last leg, but it will be upgraded eventually, completely. We had a water leak in the room, which soaked a lot of the equipment at one point about 6 months ago. We've had a lot of failures from that. So we're kind of ragtag keeping it running month to month, so getting over to the library probably would be a good thing sooner than later. And that's really the status of where things are right now.
You're saying August, Chris, we might be over there?
That's what I'm hearing from engineering right now. Ted, if he's on the line, might be able to give more insight to the project timeline, but we're hearing sometime in August as a start date for physical construction in the chambers.
Okay. You want to fill us in, Ted?
Yeah, absolutely, Mayor. Chris is right. That's our anticipated start for construction. We've got the materials ready to come to you right now. We're tentatively scheduled to come to the council on July the 7th to award the construction contract to move this thing forward.
Okay. So maybe the first meeting in August will be in the library.
Timing wise, that would be great if that's something that Chris can be ready for. But from a construction start date, we're looking at August to start the construction in the main council chambers.
Okay. All right. Well, I guess I'll figure it out. All right. Anything else? I see Councilmember Narenheim has his hand up.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Brand. So, I was looking back at the staff report from May of 2019, and then looked at the strategic plan, and there wasn't any delays on there that would say it would be another year of delay. And I see here on one of the strategic plan items, it's been in the works and planning for quite a long time. I would just ask, because this came up 3 meetings ago, that when you get delays like this, that to let us know so that we can do something else or plan and appropriately, discuss as to what's needed. Joe, I don't think I got an update from anyone. This is regarding another year's worth of delay. And I know, streaming and audio is not our problem. It's a Granicus issue. And the public looks at us and thinks it's our issue. It's a Granicus issue. But I'm just saying that, if we can, this kind of a project that grows in scope, to give us an update on this so that we know, so that when we have audio and video issues with the public, that we get properly informed, because this is the biggest thing front facing to the public that we have and that we do, and they need to know exactly what our plan is moving forward. So that's my only real comment, Joe, and everyone else. And I know we're working with Granicus, and we're on YouTube now, which is awesome. So that's great. So that's really good.
We're on YouTube?
We are on YouTube live. We're all YouTube stars now.
All right. I'm sure we'll get tons of viewers. Okay. Any other comments? All right. Well, thank you, Chris, for that update. Thanks, Ted. We'll start packing for August. But keep us posted. I guess just keep us informed of when, and I'm sure you will, when we will be in the library. Okay. With that, we'll move on to were there any comments from the public, Eleanor?
No, Mayor, no comments.
Thank you. So we'll move on to city manager items. Item 01, discussion and possible action regarding the city's local emergency pertaining to COVID-19 and civil unrest. Joe.
Yes, Mayor, council members of the public, we put this item on the agenda really as a placeholder. Every meeting that we've held since March 12th, we've had either a resolution, an update, or some discussion related to the public health emergency that was first declared on March 12th. In the meantime, we had a second local emergency declared related to civil unrest. This is the second report before you related to that. Fortunately, the curfew was lifted countywide. Since your last meeting, there were 4 nights of curfew that took place. 3 nights that were 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. We had a local curfew, as you know, that followed those same timeframes. Then there was a 4th night with a revised time frame of 9 p.m. to 5 a.m. as the curfew. Had excellent work on behalf of the men and women of the Redondo Beach Police Department to enforce the curfew, to help disseminate information about the curfew. There was a lot of excellent police work that was done, and they did a great job of keeping the community safe. So we still have the 2 local states of emergency, both in terms of the public health crisis as well as the potential for civil unrest. We don't have a curfew, but we still are on guard in the event that there is some disruption. So focusing on the things within our control, most of the restrictions that were put in place have been lifted. Closures have been reversed. There are some that remain, including the non-business areas of the pier, still closed to the public, and that's based on the county's public health order. We've got city playgrounds, basketball courts, aviation gym, aviation track and field, ball fields closed for organized play. All of those latter items tied to reopening when the county takes an action and authorizes these facilities to be opened on a countywide basis. We have also our city offices that remain closed physically to the public, including both the Main and North Branch libraries, 3 senior centers and associated programs, the Performing Arts Center, the city's teen center, all closed right now through June 30th. So the emergency orders previously approved by the council has those closures in place through the end of June. As we've discussed before, the libraries are likely to remain closed longer than that based on public health restrictions. We're in the process of moving towards a curbside service, pickup and return of books. So for tonight's item, there's no specific action requested of the council. There haven't been any actions that I've taken since your last meeting that require review or confirmation in the form of a resolution. Again, this is the 9th report that we've given to you along these lines. That's where we're at. So we're certainly happy to talk about any of the remaining restrictions or any additional information you'd like to have from us.
Okay. Well, thank you, Joan. Lots happened. Things happen fast. It's amazing. We're into curfews 3 or 4 nights. Yeah. And we still have closures, and we're still waiting for action. I guess on the remaining closures, we're waiting for actions from the county. Some of the closures that come to mind are the non-business sections of the pier, aviation park. Yeah. So I guess we're kind of waiting for the county on those. So, Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, just one quick question. Joe, I was asked if condo association swimming pools are available to be opened or not. Or are they still under the ban from the closure list from the county?
I believe they're open, but Brandy, if you're on, you've dealt with that specifically, I think.
Yeah, they are allowed to be open. I think that there were some social distancing requirements regarding that, but they are allowed to be open as long as they follow those.
And Councilman Lowenstein, you got an email from Joy Abikin.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Councilmember Narenheim.
Thank you, Mayor Brand. So a couple of questions. Parks, park equipment, Joe. Those are still closed currently.
Yes, still closed per the countywide order. So
okay.
Play equipment, the parks are open, but the playground equipment's still technically closed.
Okay. Are we going to wait for the county to make that determination, or can we just say as per county order, so that as soon as their orders come through, our parks can be open as well at the same time? I mean, there's no reason to wait.
Yeah, the way we have it written right now and what you approved previously was that our opening is tied to county action. So once the county lifts the restriction as quickly as we can take down the tape and take down the signs, ours will be open as well. So we don't have to wait for a council action or direction to reactivate our playground.
Perfect. Great. Perfect. And rent control, there's been some, I've had three questions actually from rent control, or not rent control, excuse me, rent abatement, so to speak, of people, evictions. We do not have any eviction orders in place right now, correct? That's the county or federal or state level?
Yeah, that's correct. Early on in the health crisis, there was a a moratorium on evictions put in place, both for residential and commercial evictions, that meaning that a tenant could not be evicted due to COVID-19 related issues. Either they lost their job or were confined at home and couldn't make their payments. So once the state took action on a statewide basis, and in the interim period, the county has taken action, we withdrew our moratorium, or we canceled our moratorium. So there is no Redondo Beach restriction currently in place locally that would prohibit evictions. However, I've talked to one of the tenants, or one of the landlords that you put me in touch with, Mr. Darenheim. I've had a lot of interaction with him and have involved our waterfront staff. There is a countywide moratorium in place on evictions. We have gotten some conflicting information. Does it apply here locally to incorporated cities, or is it just the unincorporated areas? A little bit later in the day today, we received information from the county office that the intent is for it to apply to all cities in the county, so including Redondo Beach. So we put landlords in touch with that information. We share that information, but just to be clear, it's not a city rule that we've put in place that prohibits evictions.
Right, and if you could forward that to me too, so I can post that. I'm going to be getting a lot more of that, those questions moving forward. A lot of landlords having issues with that, so that'd be great if you can send that to me as well, that verbiage, so I can let the landlords know.
Sure, I'll send it to all of you.
Thank you, appreciate that. TUPs, temporary use permits for Brandy. We spoke once before. The TUPs are ready to go. Where are we with the temporary use permits for private parking lots and areas like that for restaurants? And now that the orders are out, can we start processing those?
Yes, we actually have, we put together a full packet of information with a cover letter, the TUP application, as well as the county's latest their appendix that is required for restaurants. So we have that packet available. We've had, we just are issuing our second TUP this week. So it's I think it's taking restaurants a little bit of time just to get up and running in general, and then having to figure out what they're going to do for that outdoor space.
Did we remove the $210 fee on that?
No, that has not been removed.
So I can make that motion tonight to allow that to happen moving forward.
I would defer to the city attorney on that.
So as I mentioned at the time, you're going to have, I think, is it next week, the hearing on fees that are proposed to be increased as part of the budget. And that would be my suggestion, to remove it then. If anybody pays a fee, you can indicate that it can be returned. So
why would we wait until next week with the budget? Because it's a temporary. We just want to waive it just for the temporary licenses.
Because you have a fee that applies to all temporary use permits. And so it would be best to remove that for the period of the emergency during when you're handling fees. So, I don't think it makes a huge difference. This isn't particularly noticed as, so I leave it up to you. At the time when it was suggested, I said it would be good when you have a hearing on fees to accelerate that and make certain that, because the intent is not to create that like the normal TUPs, because normally the reason to get that reimbursed, and you want to have it clear. So I'll leave it up to you, but the intent was always to do it as part of your hearing on fees. And I think that's set next Tuesday when you're set to take action on the budget. Is that correct, Joe?
We just had public hearings related to the trash rates as well as landscape and lighting last week. So, Marty, if you're online to talk about what fee hearings we either still need to do or have scheduled, if any?
I thought there
Okay,
were.
we have scheduled next week fee hearings on the 2 decision packages that have new fees in it. One will be the convenience fee for taking credit card payments, and the other is community development fees. So those have all been noticed, and we're getting ready to go.
So I'll leave it up to you, Councilman Ehrenheim. I doubt that anyone will challenge us. It's just, you know me, I'm, dot the I's, cross the T's. But clearly our recommendation has always been, and Brandy's recommendation is that we shouldn't be charging fees during this emergency.
So
Yeah, and I just want to make it as simple as possible for these restaurants. They are falling. I mean, I hear it every week, multiple times in a week. They're just trying to survive at this point in time. So make it as easy as possible for them moving forward, as cheap as possible.
I withdraw my objection to you making that motion. I think we can treat it as part and parcel of the emergency.
Okay. And thank you.
I guess you can make a motion.
No, I will. The last thing is I wanted to get from Ted Simon, John LaRock, Public Works for the Riviera Village status update for shutting down Catalina between the small little areas. I saw an update come through yesterday. What is the latest with the drawings? I saw the professional drawings. I was quite impressed with those professional drawings that they had, the 108 tables. What's the update on that?
Yeah, I can give the update on that. So last Thursday afternoon is when we received the information from the Riviera bid. They had a traffic control plan that looked like it was done by a traffic control company, which is great. The layout, it's definitely better. I can't say it's fully scaled in that sense, but we could work with it. We disseminated that information to the various city departments because we do need input from fire, from police, from planning, community development, city attorney's office, waterfront, and economic development. So as soon as we receive all that information, we'll be able to share that with the Riviera bid. I've got some ideas on the traffic control plan, which I know from the get-go is going to have some issues, but once I receive that information, we're going to be contacting the bid people, the team, I should say, to go through the comments, the suggested modifications. I think we've got a viable option to consider after that. The biggest is obviously going to be the liability and the indemnification for the city because they will be out there for an extended period of time.
Great. I was just in a city yesterday, actually, that had two things. They had shut down a street in an area, and they shut down the sidewalk, and then they shut down the street parking, and they had the people walking onto the street with the barriers, water barriers, and it was a really cool experience. A lot of dining outside. People were really enjoying the outside. It really got the life going back again. People were seeing the vibrancy, even though there weren't that many cars there. And normal times have been a lot busier. But this at least shows people, hey, we're out. We're open for business. We're making things happen. So I think it's going to be something that the community is really going to be rallying around and make things happen. Catalina Avenue is pretty full with parking. But if you look at the Riviera Triangle Village, there it is empty. Hardly any cars there. So I think it's a great opportunity for us to showcase the restaurants down there. And I appreciate all the hard work, and I'm excited to have that moving forward. So thank you. So I'll make a motion to approve the city manager's report and to remove the temporary use permit fees for the TUPs as per the discussion with Brandy Forbes a minute ago.
Mayor,
Go ahead.
Mayor, we have a public e-comment.
Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead, Vicki.
Submitted by Jeff Ginsburg. My name is Jeff Ginsburg, and I am the current president of the Riviera Village Association. Due to the COVID-19 restrictions greatly affecting businesses in the Riviera Village, we submitted a blue folder item to request the city approve the special events application for outdoor dining in the Riviera Village on Catalina Avenue between Avenida del Norte and Vista del Mar, which then would make tables available to any and all restaurants in the Riviera Village with social distancing as outlined in the table layout map you will find in the blue folder item. Also, while the outdoor dining is in effect, the merchant shops would be allowed to have a sidewalk sale, which also would improve the social distancing for retail shops during the COVID-19 restrictions. City staff has done a great job in assisting the RVA with the items necessary to make this all happen. So if the mayor and city council can approve this tonight, the RVA will get started on getting this all set up. Thank you again for all you do and stay healthy during these unique times. That concludes the comments.
Mayor, I have a question for you.
Yeah, go fire away. And I think Mike Webb wanted to jump in there too as well.
I just had a question. What city did you visit?
I was up actually in Sacramento and in the Bay Area as well.
Got it. Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to, is your motion for the duration of the COVID emergency?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, Councilmember MD. You're on mute, Laura. Laura, you're on mute.
So Mike Webb asked my question, but the whole time that the COVID emergency, that's a little loose. Is it more until they allow dining indoors as opposed to the entire?
Yeah, I can address that. That is what we're actually putting into the TUP approval, is either the duration of our local emergency order, because that's something we have control over, or at such time that LA County allows them to have full capacity within the restaurant, because that's going to be more out of our control. But whichever comes sooner was what we were looking at for the duration of the TUP.
Then if we could change the motion to include that language, I would be supportive of it.
Language being that it will last until either it's lifted to allow restaurants to operate normally or the COVID, whichever comes first.
Correct.
I would agree to that.
As will I.
Okay. Well, let's hope we don't get all this set up and then immediately take it down.
I don't see that happening.
Okay. People might like it too. Okay. So any more comments from the public? Vicky or Eleanor?
No comment. No more comments, Mayor.
Or comments from staff or anybody? There's a motion on the floor by Councilmember Nierenheim, seconded by Councilmember Lowenstein. Roll call vote, Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grand.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Great. So things are starting to reopen slowly, painfully slowly, but they are starting to reopen. And you do see a lot more activity out there. So it's great to see. It's great to feel, great to see. So anything else with this item? Do we need to read anything, Eleanor, or is that it?
No, Mayor, that's it.
Okay. Well, we'll move on then to item P1. I guess I can talk about this. It's a letter to really, I guess, to both our state Senate Committee on Housing and Analysis, also to Senator Ben Allen. It should also go to Assembly Member Miritsuchi. What is SB 902? Well, let me just start off, folks, with there's a tremendous amount of housing bills moving through Sacramento right now. They take away local control. We're all excited about that. We stopped SB 827 a couple of years ago, and we stopped SB 50, and that's all well and good. But there were very high-profile bills. In the meantime, several bills last year passed, stripping us of a lot of local control, and there are many, many more bills up in Sacramento that are being voted on to strip our ability to control development in our own town. One bill authored by Assembly Member Bloom out of Santa Monica requires, I forgot the bill number right now, but it's moving through committees, requires a city council to rezone a commercial strip for 100 units per acre. Requires if the owner requests it. So these are the kind of draconian measures you're seeing going on up there, and it's pretty amazing. or as an elected official who's been involved in this for a long time, to see Sacramento basically stripping local agencies of their ability to control what goes on in their own town, because they think that local agencies are responsible for this statewide housing shortage and affordability crisis. It's pretty amazing. And when you talk to, you know, people with League of California Cities or various lobbyists who've been up there for many years, over 20 years, they're astounded at what they see happening. And it's all happening kind of under the radar because of some of these COVID restrictions and abilities to participate. And because we're so distracted, obviously, with the pandemic and now the protests and some rioting, and they're moving up there in Sacramento. So this bill here is SB 902. And I like what our staff came up with. I think it was you, Brandy, mostly. But there's an element in SB 902 that allows a city council, just a simple majority, to override what has been known for years as Measure DD, or Article 27 of our city charter, which requires a public vote for major upzonings. So I don't think it's constitutional, not to mention the least of which they're just overriding what our voters have already voted for, really with a stroke of a pen up in Sacramento. And it's moving. As I said, there's several bills up there. This is one of the more high-profile ones. It's hard to keep track of it all, but I plucked this one out just because of that particular element of it. But there's others, and I'll come back next meeting with some other bills and more explanations about why the council should be opposing these. Really, they're gutting our ability to control what goes on in our own town when it comes to residential development. So on the radar screen, obviously, are places like the AES property, Southern California Edison right-of-way property, and other properties. You know, a commercial strip could just, if some of these bills pass, could be rezoned for up to 100 units per acre. It's pretty amazing. So anyway, this is a letter in opposition, and we're going to send it to all the appropriate parties. And I'm curious if any other council members have had a chance to look at it and any other comments they have. So I guess I'll switch. I'll go right away to Councilmember Horvath.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to point out some other bills that the COG has already taken opposition positions on, and whether or not you want to bring them forward next week. So there's AB 2580 by Eggman. That's relating to conversion of motels and hotels and streamlining that process. The Bloom bill you just alluded to is AB 3107. We're doing 902 tonight, and then there's also a Senate bill by Atkins, SB 1120, related to subdivisions and tentative maps. So if you were going to bring some back for opposition, I would recommend those. The COG's already taken positions of opposition, just so you know.
Yeah, no, that'd be great. Councilmember Horvath, if you could just send me that list. There's a couple more, and we can just kind of do these all in one fell swoop. I just plucked this one out for tonight and did it quickly. And I would like to add a language to this, and maybe I'll ask City Attorney Mike Webb if he would be comfortable. I mean, I think SB 902 really violates our Constitution, and I'd like to add a line in there that, you know, it's unconstitutional. Is there some verbiage you'd be comfortable with, Mike, or?
Well, I think it violates the initiative power. It's a violation of the Constitution, and the initiative power is a power that's very protected under the law. And so I share your concerns about its constitutionality, but it was designed to do just that. Is everywhere where there's an initiative in place to prevent council from doing just that, they can. This purports to give them the authority to do so, notwithstanding that the voters have told them specifically not to. And they further can do it without secret review. So I would have no problem with any language that you add, that it's a direct attack on the initiative power, which is protected.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of communities in California. I've spoken to several of them where they have these kind of, call them whatever you want, that inserts public approval and requires a vote or some other milestone that you have to meet to do a big project. It's usually large projects, and I mean, I could see if it passes and gets through, there'll probably be lawsuits, and even a group of cities get together to challenge it moving forward from there. So we'll see. But so I guess I don't see any hands up. Are there any comments from the public you wanted to read, Eleanor? I thought there was one comment.
Yes, there's one comment.
Comment submitted by Holly Osborne. Number 1, I support the city's opposition to SB 902. Number 2, the bill permits a city to allow 10 dwellings per parcel according to the Redondo Beach housing element. The minimum size for an RN parcel is 5,000 square feet or 8.8 dwelling units per acre. This bill could allow 10 dwellings on a site at a density of 88 dwellings per acre. This is denser than the most dense areas of the city, and this bill does not require parking. Can anyone even imagine this? The maximum density permitted by mixed use is 35 DU per acre. Number 3, the above densities do not even consider the impacts of the pandemic. All the recent articles point to density being a problem with COVID-19. The Wall Street Journal, June 8, says some crowded households in remote areas are more deadly than city blocks. There, they are talking about crowded multi-generational families living together. But crowding can also occur if a landlord rents to multiple unrelated single people, such as workers or students. To prevent an absentee landlord from renting to as many single people, i.e. single wage earners, as possible to increase the rent he can collect, it is imperative that we figure out a way to limit overcrowding of unrelated adults by an unscrupulous landlord. Regarding the density of the apartments themselves, the Sunday LA Times of May 31 talked about new architecture designs that should be considered in the post-COVID area. Here is the last sentence. Cross ventilation, roof decks, balconies, courtyards, and other outdoor spaces have been considered luxury amenities. The pandemic could make them essentials. Conclusion, the SB 902 one-size-fits-all bill does not fit. Ask Mayor Brandt to text our representatives, Senator Allen and Al Murasucci, and let them know Redondo's opposition and find out their position on this. Signed, Holly Osborne. And that concludes the comments for this item.
Okay, thank you, Holly. I've actually already done that. They're both looking at it. So as I said, these bills are just coming up and passing through, and they're looking at all the bills. So I think it's timely for us to send these letters, demonstrate our opposition and why. So, Councilmember Lowenstein.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to regarding the opposition letter and then to send it off as written.
It would be nice to have the flexibility to work with the city attorney to insert a couple sentences
about constitutionality.
That it's unconstitutional. It'd be something. It won't be anything other than basically what you guys have heard. We might cite the section of the Constitution we think it violates. So it'd be nice to have that flexibility. I'll work with Mike Webb to finalize the letter and send it off.
Okay, I'll include that as well in the motion.
I'll second that.
Yeah. Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, motion by Councilmember Lowenstein, second by Nierenheim. Roll call vote. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Gran.
Aye.
And Councilmember Indy.
Aye.
Okay. Great. And Christian, if you could forward me the link.
I just did.
Oh, great. Thank you. Okay, moving right along to item number P2, discussion and possible action regarding Senate Bill 939, another proposed state bill that would define new tenant rights and commercial property owner obligations. I heard this was put on the suspense file, but it can come back, and I think we should, I'm fully in support of sending this letter of opposition. Got a lot of feedback from landlords, and we're a landlord, and it basically absolves us. It gives a lot of rights just to tenants, and it's going to cause a lot of bankruptcies for the landlords, the way I read it. Yeah. So,
Mayor, Council, there's been some new developments on this bill. Maybe Stephen Proud, if you could
sure
power up and the highlights.
Yeah, everyone should be great.
Sure. I actually think the mayor may have touched on it. The bill was introduced by Senator Weiner. It was approved by the Senate Judiciary Committee, and today, as the mayor mentioned, it was heard by Senate Appropriations Committee. It was moved to the suspense file. We have been reading news accounts, although we haven't seen any new language yet, that Senator Weiner is going to propose some amendments to the legislation. Principally, he is looking to amend. There's a portion of the legislation, if you're not familiar with it, that would allow for certain businesses who've experienced economic hardship under COVID-19 to initiate a renegotiation process with their landlord. And if they're not successful in renegotiating provisions of the lease within 30 days, they could terminate their lease. Now, we understand that the senator is going to perhaps soften some of that language as part of the updated amendment. And then secondarily, the other provision is that one related to eviction moratoriums. Right now, the legislation would prohibit the service of an eviction notice to a commercial tenant until 90 days after the state's state of emergency order expires, which right now doesn't have an expiration date on it. So don't know exactly when that could be, but whenever that date finally occurs, no one could serve an eviction notice on a tenant that has outstanding rent due and payable until 90 days after that date. We also understand that the senator may shorten that time window as well. But again, I'll emphasize, we haven't seen any of that language yet. We're hoping that's going to emerge in the next day or two. Our intent tonight was to give you an overview of the legislation, if you had any questions, and then bring the actual opposition letter back to you next week. So as we see that new language emerge, we can certainly tell you how it's evolved, and if it still seems like it's unfavorable to the commercial landlords and tilted perhaps too much into the commercial tenants' favor, we bring that forward and make our recommendation to you about an opposition letter to the Senate.
Okay. Sounds good. Should probably be back next week. I may not have any new information next week, right?
We may not. We're gonna wait to see, like I said, how it was amended. I can tell you there are two paths of advocacy that are happening right now. One is the people are going to advocate that the bill just stays in the suspense file and dies there. The second is a more stronger advocacy position to just defeat the legislation itself. So there's some pretty widespread opposition to this. And as the mayor mentioned, as a commercial landlord, we would have a direct economic impact if this were to pass.
Okay, Councilmember MD.
I'm pretty sure the answer is going to be the same either way, whether we wait or not. But I think it would be more prudent if we did wait, so that it just doesn't look like, so we wouldn't have to do it again. Does that make sense? Just because then it shows that we've read all the final language and we went from there.
Yeah, I think that would be my recommendation. I think we'd like to see, I think the senator is facing some pretty heavy blowback on some of the provisions that are in there. So it would be good to see if and how the bill were amended. We weren't expecting that. That's why we put it on your agenda for tonight. And we found out today that there may be some pending amendments. So I think that would be a wise course of action, Councilmember D.
But we can't register our opposition. Because it looks like in the list of us right now, you can see who's opposing, but we're not on the list. So we could send a letter just opposing it as is, and it shows up. And then if they change it, well, then I guess that's true. We got to revisit it, and then it's just the way it works. But the problem is the Senate's going to be voting to move it to the Assembly before we can come around, probably by July 7th.
Yeah, but right now the timeline, Mayor Brand, is if it holds, is that it would perhaps come off the suspense file for another round at the Senate Appropriations Committee on June 18th. So we'd have a chance to review this with you next week, get the letter out before that. But then you're right, the Senate would need to vote on it by the 26th of June and then move it over to the Assembly.
I think we should, come back with a letter and let us consider it. It doesn't have to be too detailed, and maybe just a broader stroke so that it could still apply, even if they amend it, make, minor amendments that doesn't change our objection to it. If it's written
Sure.
enough, it would be able to just stay on file. I don't know, because if we don't register our opposition, then when it does come back to the Senate, then it doesn't look like we're really opposed.
Yeah, we'll have that. We can have that letter for you next Tuesday night. That was our strategy, was to just give you an opportunity to hear about the issues and then present the letter. Hopefully, it's a fairly short item. We'll present the letter to you next week, and you can decide whether you want to take action on it or not.
Yeah, and the more generic, the better, and then maybe it won't get stale if they just change a few things.
Understood.
Councilman Weiner, was that it?
Real quick, does this include?
Was that it? I didn't. Is that it? Okay, Councilman.
Does this include residential as well?
No, this is a bill that is strictly geared toward commercial tenants.
Okay. Our subtenants, so our master leaseholders, if they don't collect certain rents, we wouldn't get the rent for 30%, that 30% fee, correct? Or 15% fee, whatever that contract is that we have set up with them, right?
Well, and the way that it's drafted, there's probably two answers to your question. The subtenants could withhold their rent to their master leaseholder for the duration of the duration of the state order, the state emergency order. Likewise, our master lessees, who are technically tenants of the city, and some of whom are getting rent deferrals right now, could just elect to defer their payments as well. So, it really could happen at both levels.
Okay. Okay, that's all I had. Thank you. I'll make do we want to make a motion to come back next week with this?
Yeah, I guess so.
I'll make a motion to come back next week, Tuesday, with this item.
Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Okay. Any comments from the public? Any more comments from the public, Eleanor?
No comments, no e-comments.
Could I do a roll call vote? Councilmember Nierenheim?
Mayor Brand, I do believe there was a blue folder. Are you not reading blue folders?
Oh.
No, we're not reading public folders.
From Bob Resnick? No?
Yeah, we all saw.
Everyone received the blue folders by email.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, we all saw it. We all read it.
Okay, good. Thank you.
It worked. He's curious. Okay, roll call vote. Councilmember Nierenheim?
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein?
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath?
Aye.
Councilmember Grant?
Aye.
And Councilmember.
Aye.
Okay, there you go. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, now we are back to, I guess, our public hearing on the budget. So with that, I guess we'll talk about ex parte communications first. Are there any ex parte communications, Councilmember Nierenheim?
Yeah, staff, the mayor, Councilmember Lowenstein, as well as the public.
Okay, Councilmember Lowenstein.
Staff, mayor, Councilmember Nierenheim, and public as well.
Okay, Councilmember Horvath.
Staff, public, Councilwoman MD.
And Councilmember Grant.
Aye, staff and the public.
Okay, Councilmember MD.
Staff, public, and Councilman Horvath.
Great. I spoke staff, public, Councilmember Lowenstein, Councilmember Nierenheim, and yeah, that's it. Staff, public covers a lot. Okay, with that, I'll entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion to open the public hearing.
Second.
Second. Okay, Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grand.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Okay, so the public hearing is open, and I'll turn it over to you, Joan.
Sure, Mayor, council members, good evening again. This is the continuing public hearing related to the operating and capital budgets for fiscal year 2021. This is actually the third time that we've been before you in the form of the public hearing. Actually, the fourth time if you count when you received and filed the original budget. The budget calendar that you adopted in January included tonight's meeting with a particular focus on the capital improvement program. You can talk about the operating budget as well, or decision packages, any aspects of the budget, but the presentation we have tonight relates to the CIP program. So that's our plan moving forward in terms of the staff presentation. In addition to the budget response reports that were in your packet, there were 5 additional budget response reports that you received right before this meeting began. 5 additional budget response reports. As we continue the public hearing next week, we're including in the packet kind of the running list, and all the budget response reports are included in the packet each time it's generated. So we'll be prepared to talk through those budget response reports if you have questions on those. So at this point, what I'd like to do is turn it over to Assistant City Manager Mike Wazansky, who, along with some of the other department heads, will hit the highlights of the CIP program. So with that, Mike.
Thank you, Joe. And Marty, I believe if you provide your screen share so we can run through the presentation. Great, thanks. Marty, go ahead and advance the slide. I think Joe covered that. Back up one, please. Yeah, just a reminder, here's where we are in the process. As Joe covered, next week will be our hopefully culminating public hearing on the budget. And today in blue folder, if you advance the slide, Marty, you received some additional budget response reports. 5, I believe, were submitted via blue folder, as well as some BRRs that were part of your package that came to you over the weekend. We have 25 in total. We still have 9, I believe, to be distributed to you at the end of this week. So you'll have those in your final budget package for next Tuesday's hearing. Below are some of the highlights, and we can certainly touch on those in more detail later today or next week if you'd like. Feel free to advance, Marty. So that brings us to our 5-year capital plan. We provide this presentation to you every year. It's a pleasure to do it. We have achieved, I think, great success, and really kudos to Ted Saman, our Public Works Director, our City Engineer, Andy Wengie, Brad Lindahl, who works through our program, and all our various Public Works engineers and maintenance staff who contribute to both designing and completing projects on a year-in, year-out basis. They've done a heck of a job this year again. I think it's been as good a year as we've had in our history. We'll talk about some of the highlights. Typically, we cover a more detailed highlight presentation as part of your mid-year review in March. Given the COVID crisis this year, we weren't able to do that to the same level of detail. So we'll give you kind of a highlight reel of that tonight. But 1920 has been a great year, and I think 2021 will be as well. The 5-year plan that we have proposed for you, it includes 82 projects, 9 of which are new to the plan versus last year. We have 73 carryover projects. The total funding allocation and appropriation is $58 million, of which a little under $12 million is new for 2021. The balance, the $46 million, is effectively carryover. Next slide, please, Marty. This is a slide you've seen before. I think it goes without saying. All you have to do is take a drive around town and see the improvements and the quality and feel, the look of the neighborhoods that are achieved via a roadway resurfacing or streetscape improvements or sidewalk repair, handicap ramp installation, etc. The CIP affects our quality of life. It affects our health and safety. It improves our property values and really is a big part of what we do in supporting economic development in our community. And obviously, a safe and secure roadway system and streets and sidewalks and drainage also protects city liability. Next slide, please, Marty. Our evaluation criteria as we consider projects and decide what will and will not be recommended to you is the same as it's been for quite some time. Does it have an impact on health and safety? Is it mandated objective via federal or state obligation? Does it help implement a strategic plan goal of the city council? Does it finalize or complete a project that's already in motion? This is a big one. We like to keep momentum in projects. over the years, because as you all know, it takes time and energy to get them pre-designed and then designed and then bid out and then ultimately constructed. And that's after finding all the funding. So we really like to see projects through to the end, and we focus our efforts first there. Do the projects help businesses? I think a great example of this is the improvements down in Riviera Village or the improvements along Artesia Boulevard. If we as a community invest in our public infrastructure, without fail, the business community follows. And I think we've had great success with that. Also, does it help us achieve ongoing operating savings? What we typically have to respond to roadway repair, sinkholes, things of that nature. If we're able to be proactive and improve the infrastructure in advance of those failures, we save ourselves time and money in the long run. A great example of that is our wastewater system. This community has invested quite a bit through its own partial tax assessment in funding our wastewater efforts. And I can tell you, if you look at our historical sanitary sewer overflow counts, they've been greatly improved with that investment. So it's key for us to spend money wisely, and hopefully it saves us in operations down the road. And then, of course, is the project funded through outside funding? That has been a critical element of our CIP over the years. We've done a great job. Our engineering staff, other grant writers, police, fire, community development, et cetera, have gone out and achieved grant funds. We have 4 additional grant funds this year, over $1 million that were competitive in nature, that helps supplement this CIP. We do a great job procuring regional Measure R highway project funds through participation and really not just from staff's effort, but help from council and the mayor and working with local electeds to divert money our way. So, you've been a big part of that contribution as well. So most of our CIP is funded through restricted external funds that we pull into the community rather than taking from our general funds, our fully discretionary funds, and spending them on local capital projects. Next slide, please. As I said, 1920 was a great year. We completed 17 projects. And to be fair, not all of these were started and executed in a single fiscal year. When we say completed, it just means we put the finishing touches on them. So things like the Pacific Coast Highway, Torrance Boulevard right turn lane, which took well over a decade to get designed and built, was completed this year. We're very excited about that. Big project, big resurfacing projects on Prospect Avenue, Inglewood, and Flagler Lane. Big projects, a couple years in the making. We got them done this year. Very exciting. Riviera Village enhancements completed at the very beginning of the fiscal year, really more of an 18-19 effort. Anderson Park improvements, the additional restroom up there, some walkway enhancements completed this year. Of course, the Veterans Park play equipment, the National Fitness Center were open this year. A very exciting project. Of course, they were then quickly closed with COVID, but they are a nice piece of infrastructure for us in the future, and will be and have been and will be well received by the community. We improved rubberized surfacing at several parks. We finally got around to fully rehabilitating the main library elevator. Anybody who's ridden that thing knows how slow it's been. And while it's still not super fast, it's much more reliable. So we're happy to have that project done. Citywide curb ramp installation, always year in, year out, critical effort. PV Boulevard median replacement. Anybody who's driven that stretch sees the improvements there. Ringe sewer pump station, one of the less heralded projects in the CIP, but probably one of the most important. Got done, multi-million-dollar effort, many years in the making, got completed this fiscal year. Fueling station upgrade and replacement. Our compressed natural gas facility had been down at the Public Works yard for years. That's now done. We improved our water quality distribution in Santa Monica Bay through the installation of our Torrance Circle low flow diversion project that was started as a supplemental environmental project in partnership with the State Water Board, and is a nice add down there, and ultimately will help the quality of our local water. And then we had some sewer repairs at Veterans Park. So those were our 17 projects completed this fiscal year. Again, big kudos to the Public Works team and all involved that helped us get there. Big year for CIP. In addition to the 17 that we got done, and this is why we like to separate this, we actually either designed or started construction on 15 additional projects. The top two you all know very well. The slurry program, our first installation of that effort, really good success there. You're seeing that around City Hall and throughout the community. The multi-million-dollar residential street resurfacing project is well underway. You're seeing those improvements executed now. We were able to get the North Redondo Beach Bikeway, the parcels north and south of Artesia Boulevard, largely constructed. We still have fencing up there while we allow the landscape to germinate, but that project's well underway and nearing completion. We've started the electrical improvements down at Alta Vista Park. Anybody who's been down there and watched, their sons, their daughters, their nieces, their nephews, their grandkids, what have you, participate in Redondo Sunset Little League or part of local AYSO, have seen the standby generators there that have been fueling the temporary light system for a couple of years now. Not the greatest environmental installation. We have spent the money as a community to actually make direct electrical connections to those lights. So ultimately, improving the environment down there and permanentizing a great electrical upgrade that will allow our children to play into the later hours of the night. So a nice project there that's now underway. You heard a presentation earlier on the RBTV broadcast facility upgrades, the council chamber project. That project has grown, as was stated in scope. It's over a $2 million effort now. But when it is done, and I know we're all waiting patiently for that, it will mean a much different facility for us, one that's far more user-friendly from an audio-visual standpoint and a much more hospitable environment for our future meetings, certainly post-COVID. The transit center, we talked about a couple meetings ago. We're finally getting going on that, waiting on final Metro funding, hopefully this month. And then we've got design happening at Alta Vista, the pump station there, the Alta Vista Sewer Pump Station. We've got traffic signal synchronization happening throughout town. We've got Green Street improvements that we're working on, Grant Avenue specific signal project that was grant funded. We're still working on the Inglewood at Manhattan Beach Boulevard right turn lane project. That's a multi-million-dollar South Bay regional highway program funded effort, a little under $5 million there. Pier parking structure critical repairs, really just about finished with those, just a few punch list items. Another $2 million effort there, improving our pier parking structure, great upgrade. Restroom improvements are about to be bid. We'll have those plans and specifications to you shortly. And then, of course, we continue to improve our sanitary sewer facilities. And this most recent project is upgrades along the Pacific Coast Highway corridor. So again, 17 projects executed, finalized, 14 in design or in early stages of construction. That is 2019-20. So great job, Public Works. Of some of those projects are part of this list. What this represents is the $46 million that are carrying over into the 2021 fiscal year. 29 various street projects. I just mentioned a few of them. A variety of waterfront projects. We've got a handful of park projects. Most of that money is Dominguez Park. The public facility projects that are listed there, most of that money is the transit center. General projects, that's our Path of History signs, some street signage throughout the community. Our sewer projects, that's additional sanitary sewer lift station work and design. And then a handful of drainage projects, primarily that falls in the area of our enhanced watershed management program that we partner with our local beach cities and torrents each year to execute for overall water quality improvements into the Santa Monica Bay and the Dominguez channel. So a couple of carryover projects there that we're still working on. And that actually is the source. I've mentioned this as part of our operating budget discussions, but we did pull some money out of this particular account that was general fund discretionary resources that had been previously appropriated for our enhanced watershed management activities, particularly the more recent project with Hermosa Beach that we have pulled out and are transferring into operations because we do not currently have that need. So we were thankful to be able to strip that out and help support our balancing the operating budget. So this was a category that some of that money was taken from, as well as the public facility projects account, which we originally had $400,000 attributed to replacing the Performing Arts Center seats. In light of what's happening, we pulled that out and transferred that into operations this year as well. So Those came out of this carryover funding. Otherwise, they would have been included in this list as well. Next slide, please. So new funding, I mentioned a little under $12 million, 29 total projects, of which 9 are new to the CIP, 13 street projects for about $6.5 million. You see the park projects, public facility projects, et cetera. We'll get into some detail here in the next slides. Next slide, please, Marty. Street improvements. We've got $400,000 for the installation of a westbound right turn lane at Anita and Pacific Coast Highway there at Redondo. A grant-funded project, a good project that should help with traffic flow in the community. Working on that effort. Beryl Street. This is the $800,000 that we pulled out last year for the residential resurfacing project. That's being put back. This gives us the funding we need to execute Beryl, the resurfacing between Flagler and Prospect. This includes significant drainage enhancements, as well as some complete streets, living streets enhancements to the sidewalk area. It's a very active stretch of Beryl. Beryl's a very popular street as an east-west connector for us, and this will be a great project. We are out to bid right now for designer proposals. We are just about to wrap up an RFP and should have a design contract ready for your consideration at your first meeting in July. We expect that project to take about really the full year to design. But we'll start that off with the design contract in a couple of meetings. $75,000 for bike transportation plan implementation. This is our typical annual source of funds. It doesn't have a specific call for use at this point. We put it into this account, and then typically it'll become additive to an existing project or be used to design something that you all feel is important later. This is part of our 10% set aside under our direct allocation of Measure R funds. Citywide curb ramp project. This is funded through our CDBG allocation each year. $186,000 should buy us about 25 to maybe 30 ramp installations, depending on final siting. Those ramps will usually work part and parcel with our street rehabilitation project next phase that'll happen at the latter part of the next fiscal year. And then this $293,000 is another supplemental appropriation to what is already a little over $700,000 of carryover funds for the slurry seal program, giving us about $1 million to work with next fiscal year. Again, that slurry seal project has been very successful, and we look forward to allocating those funds by street with the culmination of what is currently underway in your 3-year street annual or triannual street assessment. So we'll have that to you, I think, in the fall, and you'll get a chance to figure out how to spend these monies. $800,000 back to Manhattan Beach Boulevard resurfacing, similar to Beryl. We pulled the $1.6 million between those two projects so we could get more of our neighborhood residential resurfacing project work done. We are putting that money back into those accounts at a time when we were closer to actual construction. North Redondo Beach Bikeway Extension, another kudos to the Public Works team for acquiring a 2-year grant to get this work done. This will extend the North Redondo Beach bike path from Felton to Inglewood. We have obtained a $1 million grant that's being allocated to us over 2 years. This is the first tranche of that funding. That project is in design, and we hope to go out to bid kind of latter part of the fiscal year. And then similarly, we have money being allocated to design what would be a spur of the North Redondo Beach bike path to connect it south to the Grant Ripley exchange with Inglewood. So not to cross Inglewood at that point of terminus, but to actually route it south to connect to a safe crossing that exists today. Next slide, please, Marty. Big one every year, residential street rehab, $1.4 million being recommended there. That will be coupled with a couple $100,000 of carryover funds. We anticipate somewhere between 1.7 and 1.8 million in street rehab, maybe a little bit more depending on final expenditure of the existing project. There could be punch list items that go to that, but we'll know that as we wrap that up here in the next month or two. $700,000 towards our sidewalk improvements program. We've had great success recently in ramping and grinding, first identifying our various trip and fall hazards in the community and then addressing them. $500,000 of this $700,000 will be used to complete that effort citywide. get rid of all the identified hazards in our community on a sidewalk basis. And then that will leave a couple $100,000. We view it as $100,000 for Artesia and $100,000 for Riviera Village to do general sidewalk enhancements, not just trip and fall things, but actual beautification efforts. So we have a couple $100,000 there to improve our key commercial sectors. Torrance Boulevard resurfacing, this puts the money back into the Torrance Boulevard account that you recently redirected for the transit center project via Prop C funds. This puts that back and allows us to go out and build Torrance. First, we have to design, but then build the Torrance project. Another tranche of traffic calming money, $240,000 to supplement that account. We should have a little bit of leftover funds. You have a budget response report that talks about the status of the projects in that area. We should have a little bit of carryover there. But this money right now would be unspoken for, and it would be subject to the needs of residents and neighborhoods as they come forward, and anything you all think is critical from a traffic calming standpoint. And then we have the first part of a large grant. We have a $2 million grant we obtained. We're getting $200,000 this year to do the design work for the traffic signalization effort. And then we hope to obtain the $1.8 million for the next fiscal year to actually build out the network. So big effort on, again, synchronizing our signals and trying to enhance traffic flow in a safe way through our community. Next slide, please. Park improvements. You have $60,000 already for the Dominguez Park Improvement Program, the dog park. This would add another $60,000, taking it up to $120,000. Really fencing, perimeter fencing improvements, entryway improvements, hopefully some regrading, and just general sort of functionality improvements to that facility, widely utilized our one and only dog park. Another $240,000 to go with existing carryover money for the Dominguez Park Improvement Project account. The play equipment, as we know well through the Veterans Park design, should run us some significant dollars. This additional allocation should get us all the way there from a fully funding standpoint. We're out working with the community on designing that effort, and hopefully as COVID subsides, we'll have an opportunity to have a more robust engagement in that regard and bring you a proposed design for consideration. An additional $60,000 as well to continue our play service refurbishing program. That's been really successful. Each of these parks here, Anderson and Perry, have need. Next slide, please. Public facility projects. Some of these should be familiar, others not. The first one's $100,000. We mentioned this in the operating budget. This is an effort for us to go out and start looking at options for us to relocate Community Services Department office personnel and counterfunction to either City Hall or other city-owned facilities that with final build-out would allow us to stop paying rent at the cotton shop there, as it's called colloquially, on Artesia Boulevard. Allow us to basically move from tenanted space that we lease to permanent space that we own. As we've shrunk our workforce, we believe we have capacity at City Hall, and we think it's worth starting to invest in an effort that'll take a few years to execute to allow us to move away from that annual rent payment. The next project, $300,000, is the next phase in our effort to install pre-constructed modular shooting range facility in lieu of the outdoor range that has been problematic for us in the past. This $300,000 would complete the design of that effort and ultimately allow us to install purchase and install modular units in the next year or two following. Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center electronic message board. I mentioned that we took $400,000 away from the PAC for seat refurbishment and replacement. We are putting 120 back into the facility to replace the message board. Anybody who's driven by there recently knows it's in quite a state of disrepair. The messaging is difficult to read. It's very antiquated. There have been a lot of improvements to the technology since its time of installation, and we think this is a good effort because it doesn't just message the PAC, it messages other activities at aviation and is really kind of a signature entry point for our community. And then another $180,000 of PEG fees. These are non-discretionary funds that we receive that will go towards the council chamber project to make sure we're covered for contingencies and can fully build that out. And we are confident that we have enough money to get that done, given current engineers' estimates. And then $35,000 that's being allocated from the annual transit operations budget that is received through federal and state funds, metro funds, that is given each year to the BCT for improvements at their operations center. So non-discretionary source of funds can only be spent on transit operations, and this will go towards their center. Next slide, please. Drainage improvements. So the $200,000 at the top of the line there is in order to set some funds aside to respond to future concerns if they arise and to do proactive drainage lining. We have corrugated metal pipe throughout our community. We have been cammering those facilities, and we've identified our weakest areas, and this funding ultimately allows us to treat those areas, or if we can't get to them in time, respond to areas that collapse before we're on site. $500,000 through our Measure W account. Again, funds we're now receiving from the county for water quality improvement projects, this $500,000, and it's going towards obligated execution of our enhanced watershed management program, really partnership projects with as I said earlier, our beach cities, neighbors, and Torrance. And then some Green Street improvements efforts. Usually this money gets allocated to a specific project or street project when it's happening. This is actually money that's going specifically to a joint effort with Manhattan Beach and others that's already been identified as part of our EWIMP, part of our, again, our regional effort to improve water quality in Santa Monica Bay. Next slide, please. Sewer improvements, I won't cover them all. They're all very critical. Alta Vista, Morgan, Portofino, our regular sanitary sewer rehab effort where we go in and upgrade pipe that is potentially ready to fail, and then design efforts at Yacht Club Way. So these are our remaining critical pump lift stations. We got Renge done. We're now turning our attention towards these. Alta Vista's design is nearing completion. That'll be the first one under construction. Morgan, Portofino, and Yacht Club are entering design. And that's it. So you've already convened the public hearing. Our recommendation after you take public testimony and ask various questions would be to continue the public hearing to June 16, 2020. Thank you all. It's been, again, and thanks to Public Works for all their hard work this past year and going forward. Again, the CIP has been a big part of our success story in Redondo Beach.
Okay. Well, thank you for that presentation, Mike. That was quite comprehensive and extremely impressive. Well, I love the way you laid out all the projects we've completed. It showcases all the great work our Public Works Department is doing, but all our departments who go and they get the funding, they find grants elsewhere. And it takes a whole range of departments to get these things done. So thanks for that comprehensive presentation. It was well worth the time. So with that, I see the first hand up is Councilmember MD. So let's go to Councilmember MD.
First, thank you. I agree with the mayor is that it takes all the departments. It's not just Public Works, but Public Works is obviously the big part of it. But thank you to everybody to make so many big projects happen, and it's great to see. Just kind of a clarification for the public really is, so the Renge project that was completed is you mentioned is similar to the Hermosa Beach project that was canceled. No. What are you saying?
No, Renge is the sewer lift station project. The Hermosa project was a water infiltration project for drainage and water quality improvements into Santa Monica Bay. That was an EWIMP project. The Renge project is our own wastewater infrastructure.
Okay, that's what I wanted to clarify, because I was like, okay, thank you. I thought I obviously heard that wrong. And so
may I add to Councilwoman MD's question there? What we did at the Torrance Circle, which you saw at Betts Park, we did do an infiltration project very similar, a little smaller in scale than the EWIM project that we're talking about with the city of Hermosa Beach. So that's the extent or the style of a project that you would see out there.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Torrance Circle being distinct from Ringe, right? So Ringe is the sewer lift station. Torrance Circle was a low flow diversion installation, much more akin to what we were talking about in Hermosa.
And okay, thank you for that clarification. And the second thing is a concern about the roads. I was looking at the timeline on when the slurry and the repaving of roads is happening for this year, and the timeline from it was such that I'm concerned that we haven't met those same criteria for the next round. And I really want to keep our momentum up on repaving these roads and resurfacing rather these roads. And it seems like we're not quite on schedule to be right on there to be ready for the next round coming up. It's just like, why can't they be kind of on top of each other? So while you're doing the resurfacing, you've got the prep work going on for the next round, and I don't see that kind of happening.
Yeah, and maybe I should clarify. The project that's happening now, the major reconstruction effort that's happening now, was effectively 2 years worth of funding. That's $4.7 million of awarded money. You recall, we advanced cash to actually expand our scope. So we, in effect, did 2 phases of work with the current project that's underway. So we're now funding this fiscal year, the next phase. And this next round is going to be subject to the completion of our triannual pavement management study. That pavement management study is currently underway. They've done their field work. They're putting together their report. We should have it in the next few months. That study will drive our next phase of recommended streets to both be slurried and reconstructed. So we need that first. Then we develop our scope of work, and then we'll go out and build. So you're right in that we won't be probably constructing phase 3 this fiscal year. We'll be designing it and likely constructing it this time next year, but likely summer of next year.
Is there a way then to get the 4th phase to be done a little more concurrently so that we can see the phase 3 and 4 done together in the next 2 years? Because I'm really concerned about this big gap. It's one of the biggest complaints I get is our roads. And so if the residents don't see a consistent moving towards, I don't
Sure.
I anticipate a lot of unhappy people.
No, totally understand that and couldn't agree more. I mean, there's a lot of pent up need. And depending on the timing of the scope of work preparation, let's say hypothetically, we're putting the finishing touches on the scope of work. And this is what happened a year ago. And we're at budget time next year, and we're awarding funds to the 21-22 CIP approval. You may be able to direct that money to the CIP that's being developed, and we might actually be able to combine phases 3 and 4 into next year's scope of work and effectively do 2 phases again with that construction. So it is possible. It's going to depend on our timing, how quick we are with the scope, and how much money we know we'll have available to us into 21-22.
Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Starts with the pavement management study. We need to continue to use that as our guide.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councilmember MD. Councilmember Lowenstein.
I would concur with Councilmember MD. This takes a long time. I understand that we have to reconstruct ramps. We have to reconstruct sometimes curbs, but slurry seal, that's a straightforward thing. You would think we'd be able to do this a lot quicker, even with the pavement management system, study taking 3 months. We're pretty late compared to when we approved a lot of these appropriations. And so I would agree. I think time's of the essence. I agree with her completely. None of us are experts when it comes to paving roads, but it just seems to drag on and on. I understand about Prospect with the funding and everything else, but some of our roads, and I will do a shout out to North Redondo, some of the roads are in bad shape up there, and they're only getting worse as the winter rains hit. So I think time's of the essence. I would agree with Councilmember MD on this completely. Along those lines, can I get a budget response report on Burl, what it would cost to either slurry seal it or to rehabilitate it with a mill and overlay?
For the portion, I'm assuming you mean between Pacific
PH to Prospect.
It'd be a high level estimate, but we could probably get you that figure as part of next week's packet.
Right. I'm specifically that section between PCH and Prospect would be very helpful for me.
And just so you know, Councilman, we did look, based on your inquiry yesterday, we did look at the PCI of that segment.
Mm-hmm.
It is well below 70. It's in the high 50s and low 60s at various stages along that length of the street. So it's probably only a candidate for some level of grind and overlay, but we can certainly provide you a price.
Okay. That's going to be not inexpensive, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And then, as you and I talked yesterday, Mike, you look through, I realize that in the budget response report you've already provided us, you look at the PCI numbers and, we're taking some of them from like an 81 or 82 to 88 or 90.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the roads are, 40s and 50s. And, I want to dedicate, I realize that it isn't exactly who was it? Rand Nichols or Moffitt Nichols? I forgot who was the people that did the PCI study.
Oh, I forget their name now. Ted, do you recall?
Yeah.
I do. It's NCE, Nichols Consulting.
Nichols Consulting. They recommended that you even keep up the good roads to be great roads. But still, when you're, slurry sealing a road that's 80, that everybody can see is good, I'd like us to come up with some type of a policy, not a hard and fast policy, but, when it goes below a certain PCI, that's when it needs a lot of love. But, people look at it and go, what's wrong? Why are you doing this? The road's fine. Why are you doing this? There's a road down the street from me that's in horrible shape. We should be addressing that road too. So, again, I understand what their recommendation is, but it's hard to convince the public of that.
Yeah, it absolutely is. As we talked about it yesterday, it's really the optics versus the efficiency, the raw engineering efficiency that's achieved by committing funds to slurry versus reconstruction. And Andy and Ted can speak to it better than I can. But, the short of it is, I think for us politically, we're going to, and we've said this before, we'll continue to do a balance of the two. We'll lean more of our resources to the reconstruction effort because of what you just described.
Mm-hmm.
Optics issue. We have old streets that are really in need of repair. Of course, the counter to that on a raw efficiency basis is that the slurry seal can go a very long way and can protect the integrity of roads for a much longer period of time at much less of an expense. And I think we're seeing that. Some of the slurry work that we executed, just a $400,000 effort, went a very long way this fiscal year. So we'll continue to balance that. We'll have to work to manage the optics, but yeah, we certainly understand that sensitivity, and ultimately we'll have a robust discussion about the two as part of the receive and file of the next round of study. So
yeah, and I think the slurry seal project, like you said, has been very good. At least the ones that were done in District 2 look great. And I also have driven Catalina. That they did a great job on Catalina, all the way through the village. So, I think it's a great program. It takes our dollars really far. And it looks like between the appropriation this year and the carryover, we're going to have $1 million.
Yeah.
That should go pretty far. So
we should be able to do a lot with that.
Yeah. A couple other things. One is, great accomplishments, but again, why is it taking 3 years to put a shower in down by the hand launch?
I had a feeling you might ask that question.
Yeah, you knew I was going to ask that. But...
Yeah, so while we didn't list it as one of the 14 that are currently in design, because we haven't employed a consultant to design it for us, we are working on it. We're going to install it with our public works maintenance crews. We went out to bid. The bid came back at, I think, $140,000 or $160,000 for the shower. We thought that was outrageous.
Yeah.
So Ted is working creatively with Mr. Klein. And Ted, if you want to talk about kind of where we're at with that and when we think that'll be installed.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mike, you're right. we did, estimating that this was going to be a public works project, we did prepare plans and specifications. We put it out. It was a ridiculous bid that we received. That was $168,000 for such a small facility. We even looked at options, considered options with current contractors that are working with the city. We could not get a price that was reasonable for truly a very limited amount of work. So right now the plan is, since we've been tied up with this COVID situation, come July, that'll be top priority for our operations guys to start the construction on it.
Okay, just keep that in mind. People have been waiting patiently. And so, yeah. Thank you.
Understood.
Okay. Two more things. One is the harbor railing replacement. We have something like $822,000. You know, we were going, I know we did the railings at the top of the parking deck that was refurbished. Are we going to go pretty hard on that? Because there's some railings that are in really, really bad shape down there.
They are, couldn't agree more. They're in terrible shape and been in terrible shape for some time. We really are enjoying the work that was done above Kincaid's there as part of the parking structure project. That was part of that effort through the contractor. What we're doing out on the Horseshoe Pier is similar to what we're finding with the shower. It's easier for us to roll this out on a maintenance effort. We're removing panels. We've got 7 panels removed currently. We have found a vendor that will provide the proper remediation and resurfacing of those in an environmentally appropriate way off-site. And then once we get those treated, we bring them back and install them with our own staff. So we're putting our building maintenance staff to work to kind of support that effort on a progressive basis. It'll probably, you know, maybe a better analogy is it'll be more like the Golden Gate Bridge. We'll start on one end and it'll probably, by the time we get down to the other, we'll have to turn around and do it again. But we are going to be progressive in that. Same with our Pier light replacement effort. We have money there to buy the material and install it. We think we can do it in-house as effectively, and that's our current effort. If for some reason we see that stall out, we get too distracted, we don't have the resources to get it done, we'll pull it back, we'll do a unit count, and we'll bid it out. But right now we're doing it kind of panel by panel. I think, what'd you say, Ted, today? We have 7 panels out now, and we'll kind of do that on a reciprocal basis.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was just going to say that to complement that, there are some panel segments that are near Kincaid's down in the walkway area that are beyond refinishing, and we're packaging specs to actually have a contractor do what we did on the parking deck, which is remove and replace them. Those are beyond refinishing. And for the replacement, yeah, we want new fabricated panels and have them installed at the same time.
Yeah, they're corroded pretty badly.
Correct.
Yeah. Okay, great. Last thing, on page 517 of the budget agenda packet is all the bicycle plan grant money. And we're talking about from 2013, 2014, things like citywide bike facilities. We have $853,000 allocated towards it. That's all grant money from, who was it? The U.S. Department of Transportation. Who is it from? Do you know?
Mostly Metro, I believe, Ted, if you want to jump in on that. You're muted, Ted.
I'm muted. Yes, a lot of that does come in from Metro. As a matter of fact, we have one that was a significant project that we just went to the Metro TAC to get the extension. We have a consultant helping us on the design of that to get that implementation going soon. It is, because of the way that it's funded, we do have to go through an E76. As you recall, we went through that for Prospect because it is monies that is controlled through Caltrans, and we're going to put that in motion very quickly. It's actually in motion already.
Yeah, I mean, you know, because there's a lot of money that's tied up in here. For example, the Burrell Street bike lanes, is something like that? Is it, you know, setting up delineators? Is it, you know, actual striping? Is it creating class 1 bike lanes, or what is it?
Yeah, those wouldn't be class 1. Those would be looking at class 2 facilities, so long as we have the available space. And that component that will actually be tied into the Burrell resurfacing project and or restriping as we look at areas that are not part of the reconstruction area. So overall for Burrell, we've got multiple areas to be considered where we don't have multiple lanes. Class 2 facilities are very easy to do, as we did between Flagler and 190th. And then in other areas, if it turns out to be a class 3, then that's what it has to be as well.
But what about like citywide bike facilities? I haven't seen anything related to that.
Well, these are all part of the citywide bicycle master plan. And when we say citywide bicycle facilities, anything that applies that's part of the bicycle master plan. Burl Avenue is a perfect example. The segment that was done was part of the bike master plan. The segments that you just asked about, those are part of the bike master plan. So those would be part of the overall facilities.
So like a citywide bike facility would be something like a bike corral or something similar to that?
No, it actually references bicycle facilities within the city. And Andy, I know you've got some insight on some of the background on it. Maybe you can add a little bit more to it.
Yeah, happy to jump in on that. We have actually a fairly detailed list of segments of streets around the city where they were identified for this grant to go. A number of them in the avenues, Lilienthal comes to mind, Ripley. So we just didn't take the time to list them out by street, but they're well-defined segments. We've got actually just provided a map for the Metro TAC to re-up our funding next year. So I could easily share that with all of you if you'd like to see a copy of that map.
When do you anticipate most of these being implemented? Or is this, we're talking years and years, right?
No, we just finished the environmental process, and so now our next step is to get a designer on board. That'll take place at the beginning of this next fiscal year, and the federal calendar changes fiscal year in October. So as soon as October rolls around, we'll apply for the E76 for construction. But we anticipate we'll be able to start doing the build, later part of the coming fiscal year, next spring and summer. And it's mostly striping. There will be a few hardscape improvements. We've got a concept along Lilienthal that we're looking forward to using some space there to improve the roadway surface for biking. We're also looking at some video detection along Torrance Boulevard and a couple of elements like that are in the grant.
Well, I'm sure you've done this, but I would encourage you, having traveled a good amount, I've seen, I was in Miami in January. The bike lanes are painted green. I believe they are in Santa Monica and a lot of other places in LA and West Hollywood. And, you go to Europe and they have obviously reflectors that separate the main traffic way from the bike lanes. So people not know that it's a warning sign to drivers not to drive over that. I mean, I hope it's not we're going to paint a line with a stenciled bike and say that's a bike lane. It just doesn't cut it, in my view, in terms of all the money that's dedicated towards it. I'd like people to know that it is clearly reserved for bicyclists. And I think if you see what other cities do, I don't think there's any reason why we can't duplicate that in terms of some of these things. I realize it involves more maintenance and costs. But, let's make it look good. Let's not just make it look like, hey, it's an afterthought, so.
Yeah, and I think, Councilman, you'll see a combination of all those efforts in this large grant. The Lilienthal example is going to require some right-of-way acquisition in concert and participation with the school district there at Lincoln School. And, or maybe that's
Adams and Washington.
Adams at that point, next to Washington, right?
Yeah.
So that area is a complete streets design. It would be a significant change. And then so it goes from that level of complexity to the basic, striping of a class 2 facility. So it runs the gamut. And maybe what we ought to do is package up for all of you that detailed listing so you have a better handle on, where we expect this money to be utilized.
Okay, great. I've spoken enough. Thank you very much for addressing it.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Lowenstein. Councilmember Horvath.
Yeah, I don't want to beat a dead horse, but I do want to just echo some of Todd's comments because we've had this conversation multiple times over the past few years about bike lanes, drawing attention to them, using green paint, using delineators, to make them protected. I think if there's so many benefits out of this kind of tragedy of COVID that we've seen. And one of them is that families are walking more, riding more, and the more we can provide them with truly safe ways to get around the city, the more we can actually have a great effect on lowering traffic, which is actually something we've also seen during this, right? Less people driving, it's starting to clearly pick up again. But you know, it was kind of nice to drive in those early times of COVID because it was quiet. It just had a peaceful calmness to it, especially as you saw people out and about. And then going back to Todd's comments about streets, as that PCI, the pavement management system does come back. I know we chose a strategy, and I'm still on board with that strategy in order to effectuate as much as we can and get our index up and stuff. But at the same time, in echoing some of his sentiments and some of Laura's as well, you know, as I'm looking at some of the streets, you know, and especially in the BRR here, right? It's a really, I know this might change based on the PMS, but it's a very big slurry program in the next phase, and that's great. But what is interesting about it, right, is that there's segmentations. You know, like a block here, and then you go 2 blocks, and it's another block on the same street. And so, you know, just as we look at it, I think going back to your comment, Mike, of optics. People don't get it. They don't understand, well, why did they just do it there? And then 2 blocks later, they slurried it again. But in between, you know, it still needs some help. And it may need, in between may need like, you know, a grind and overlay or something, you know. And so my thoughts have just been, and clearly you guys will look at this as you look at the PMS, but maybe we should also just start thinking about focusing on the roads that clearly have a lot of wear and tear. Here in North Redondo, it's a lot of the north-south streets, you know, what you would call the cut-through streets. You know, people use them to avoid PCH or Prospect or Inglewood. And so I think optically that has a direct effect on people when they're constantly commuting or using a street like that on a day in, day out basis. I know that that's above and beyond kind of really, that's a little bit more in the weeds of what we're talking about tonight. But that's all I have. Thank you.
Okay. Councilmember MD.
One thing you just said, Councilman Horvath, concerns me a little bit because we set the direction for staff to go on, and I get the argument about the optics, but we set this direction, and I think it's our job to educate everyone on what we're doing. And I think the real thing that will solve the optics of it is that we stay on a consistent schedule so that everybody sees there's constant movement on this project. So, you know, and what I mean, and just to make sure I'm being clear, I don't expect all the roads to be done at once, but I would like to see that as we're going to the next phase, we can go to, you know, start the sidewalk work or the concrete work on the 4th phase. And that's where I was going with my comments. And I just want to make sure we know that, because I remember as a council, we decided we wanted to increase our average PCI. And the way we did that is by making sure our good roads are maintained and bringing up our bad roads. And at the beginning, it's going to look weird, but eventually they'll be in there, and it'll be much more cost effective because the good roads won't take as much to be able to be fixed. Am I saying that correctly, Mr. Wazanski?
Yes, you are. And again, I think the best time to have this conversation will be when we have that pavement management study right in front of us and we're looking at it. And I think the study will reflect your investment. To put this into some perspective, the $4.7 million you put into the residential resurfacing project here that's been the last 2 phases is at least 2.5 times the amount of any single residential neighborhood reconstruction program we've ever executed. I mean, I can't in my 14 years here think of a time when we even spent a full $2 million, let alone almost 5. So there's no question this council has made it a priority. We certainly understand it. And we are working as quickly as we can. And I think the PMS coming back to you in the fall will be your next big robust conversation on this subject. And I think you'll have a good opportunity to really get in the weeds on what streets are proposed and why we're proposing them. And you'll continue this robust conversation.
Thank you. I'm done.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember MD. Councilmember Horvath, did you mean to have your hand up again?
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify. I'm not saying to move away from our strategy. I just wanted to point out that as we look at the new PMS coming in and we reevaluate, because a lot of the, one of the things that staff is saying that some of the streets on the BRR could potentially change, right, as a result of the new data coming in. So I'm just saying to just open up based on comments that Councilmember Lowenstein made and you made, just as we're thinking about it, where can we get the most bang for our buck and have the most impact? It's still meeting our prior strategies, but also just considering, hey, does it make sense to do a segment here and a segment there, or does it make sense to try to work that to get the bigger projects and the slurries together? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councilmember Horvath. Eleanor, why don't we go to the public, take any comments that you have from the public?
Okay, we have 5 e-comments. Go ahead.
First one is submitted by Holly Short. The miscellaneous employee bargaining units, RBCEA, RBPSA, and Teamsters are submitting this statement in 2 parts for e-comment. During the City Council's budget discussion on May 26, Mayor Brand requested information on potential savings resulting from various levels of employee salary reductions. The miscellaneous bargaining units urge the City Council consider other options which do not involve compensation reductions and deauthorization of filled positions to address a projected budget shortfall resulting from the COVID-19 emergency. Salary increases for miscellaneous employees have not been prioritized, thus leaving us with nothing left to contribute. Our salaries, net of corresponding CalPERS contributions, have increased less than 4% in total during the last 11 years. In other words, less than half of 1% per year for over a decade, as CPI has increased annually since 2010, an average of 2% each year, for a total of 20%, which has further eroded our wages. Recently, the safety departments have been made a priority by receiving salary increases, which have an exponentially direct increase to the city's PERS costs. Please remember that miscellaneous employees also contribute greatly to the services provided to residents and businesses within the city. In fact, miscellaneous employees ensure CIP projects move forward, approved developments move forward, city streets, parks, and other city infrastructure are maintained, and public safety is properly supported, to name a few of the key contributions. The fact that miscellaneous employees' salaries have remained stagnant likely is a reason the current budget forecast isn't worse. Asking employees to take a larger share of the burden is once again unfair. Added to that comment submitted by Lena Portalese, the city manager and department heads have worked diligently to present a balanced budget without unilateral cuts to all employees, as they recognize the overall negative impact to employee morale such cuts would create. It was a pained and deliberate task for management. Asking management to set aside this effort in lieu of one-size-fits-all approach shows lack of creativity on the council's part. There are other options council should consider, such as incentives for retirement and utilizing the general fund reserve. Budgeting for the extreme worst-case scenario seems drastic at this point. To permanently deauthorize filled positions in response to a likely temporary situation is extreme. We would recommend utilizing the general fund reserve to preserve the filled positions until revenues recover. We would also ask council to consider the remainder of vacant positions be deauthorized only as long as the fiscal forecast is in the negative, and that those positions be prioritized for reinstatement as soon as revenues improve to prior expected levels. Lastly, please bear in mind that economic recovery post-COVID-19 is fully dependent on consumer spending, which is directly tied to expendable income. All employers, including the city itself, must keep employee salaries at pre-COVID-19 levels in order to stimulate spending and bring the economy back. Our employees spend money in Redondo, and also some live in the city, and cutting salaries would be a direct hindrance to helping our local businesses recover. Third comment submitted by Matthew Hensley. Good evening, Mayor Brand, City Council members and staff. The first question I think should be discussed and agreed upon during this public hearing is, what amount of budget shortfall next year in FY 21-22 does this council assume to exist? Without that number and based underlying assumption discussing what to cut and how to cut, either one-time or permanent, and even how much savings, if any, cannot be answered. Please discuss that and other assumptions in the budget, not only this year, but next year and the year after. First, I oppose decision package number 25, which ends a third-party internal audit conducted by Moss Adams. This is a short-sighted reaction with only the immediate costs in mind. The Moss Adams report, which I have read through in great detail, includes efficiency improvements, loss prevention methods, and improvements to policies and procedures within the city. The city should get a lot of credit for starting the process and taking an internal look, but stopping now is not in the best interest of the city. Also, in that report, the city staffing was already bare bones with one person doing two roles, leading to highlighted gaps in processes. Second, I still oppose decision package number 16, which I previously voiced my opposition and heard the subsequent discussion at the previous meeting. One compromise might be to shift the main library hours later to have a safe place for junior high and high school students after school, but shift the North Branch library hours to close earlier to still maintain the story hours and children's activities loved by all residents with young families, including my own family. In support of other comments that appears to come from your own staff members, I support looking at making most cuts one-time and using more one-time money like drawing down on the savings to cover shortfalls in next year's budget. If at mid-year more cuts are needed, it can be taken up at that time. Thank you, Matthew Hensley. From Lee Collar, in regards to decision package number 29 regarding reduction of Harbor Patrol staffing by 1/3, the Harbor Patrol is the only safety agency located in King Harbor currently staffed 24/7. Reducing staffing by 1/3 will mean 1/3 of the time there will be no one present in the harbor to respond to emergency calls. Chief Metzger has said as much. Lee Collar, Redondo Beach resident and boater. From Lee Folk, I oppose the 33% cut to the Harbor Patrol. Baywatch's priority is outside the harbor, assisting with beach rescues and patrolling the open water, not covering the area inside the harbor. To have no Harbor Patrol on any given weekend is unacceptable. RBFD Harbor Patrol needs to be on 24/7, just like the fire departments in all the other harbors. Fire stations have the possibility, if needed, of calling for backup from other area cities or the county. There is no backup for the Harbor Patrol. You would not leave a land-based fire station without staff 2 days a week. Neither should you leave King Harbor without coverage for 2 days a week. And that concludes the comments.
Okay. Thank you, Vicki. I don't have any hands up, so I'll just make a few comments. Those were some great comments from our employee associations and from some residents. First, I'll just kind of take them in order because I was making notes as we were going along, Holly Short and the miscellaneous employees and potential savings, and that I requested, I don't believe that request actually got legs, how much you could save with, across the board employee cuts. This is what happened in 2009. And I was surprised to see zero discussion about it. But back the last time we had this sort of crisis, the employees elected to take 6.5% pay cuts, as I recall, to save jobs. So we still ended up laying people off. I was surprised to see no discussion of that at all during this crisis, which, it is up to the employees. And so I think it made it clear that they don't want across the board pay cuts. So that's pretty much off the table. But as somebody who was on the council at the time, and that was my first budget, it was interesting how it got handled then and how this is getting handled now. And I think the big difference really is that this is hopefully a one-time event, and that you see some sort of V-shaped recovery, to use Wall Street parlance, as a result of this sort of event here in 2020, where in 2009, it was seen more as a ongoing structural problem that was going to be ongoing, and that we needed some sort of compensation cuts from the employees. And don't think this is coming from somebody on his high horse. As an employee of American Airlines in 2003, I took about a 25% pay cut. When you factored in all the 16% salary cuts and the benefit cuts and the changes to work rules, I know what it means to take pay cuts. And those were not voluntary. So they did it to avoid bankruptcy, and then they filed bankruptcy anyway. So this isn't coming from somebody who's out of touch with what the frontline employees have to deal with. and the participation that they, in the great work that they do, and the reason that the city works. These are people that come to work day in, day out, and make the city run, and they could do it without supervision. They just show up and do it. So, I got that message loud and clear. Likewise, Lena Portalisa, you worked with the department heads and city manager. Fair enough. Much of this budget is balanced. The $9 million gap is closed, which is really larger than that when you take into account the harbor enterprise. It's more like 13 million. Is based on hoping that these are one-time losses, and that we're going to have, again, a V-shaped recovery. So let's hope for that, because I think you are going to see more structural changes if that doesn't pan out. But I just appreciate all the hard work that's gone in, both from our staff, the employees, and everybody working together to try to figure out a way to close this. It's not, and it was done quickly. It was done very quickly. I mean, we went from in January, things looking great, to coming up with closing a $9 million gap. So, incentives for early retirement. We talked about that last time. Mike or Joe, I mean, have you guys looked at that since we talked last time? Is there a budget response report that came in the blue folder tonight that I didn't see? What's the thought on that?
No BRR, Mayor, specific to that subject. Joe, I think, touched on that last week. Joe, if you wanted to add your thoughts.
The pension system previously had a program where cities could buy kind of service credit or airtime. It's been years since I've looked at that, but the program in the past worked in a way that you could offer retirement incentives to a classification of employees. You had to offer it kind of across the board. It was the kind of thing where it wasn't clear exactly, who would take advantage of it. But once someone opted for the early retirement and they used the extra service credit, then that position could not be filled. And there was, very high expense associated with that program. So we didn't do a budget response report on that. The one thing we did do based on the mayor's original request was in budget response report number 3, we did include the dollar value of an across the board pay cut for employees. So that information is in a budget response report. We didn't ignore that we provided that information. So that's in budget response report number 3. But we don't have a plan at this point to do a follow-up on the early retirement incentives at this point.
And I'll add, Mayor, I will say PEPRA, the state reform, has drastically shaped what types of service credit one can purchase. And it's likely that a retirement incentive would be something we'd have to fiscally bear the cost of, and not something that would necessarily be partnered with PERS. There are other supplemental retirement programs, PARs, and some other things you can buy into and pre-fund service credit and the like. But those typically, like PERS does, have long-term fiscal implications for the city that's participating.
Okay, what was also mentioned was tapping our general fund reserve, which I've heard from other employees. Why don't we, isn't a global pandemic a reason for tapping our general fund reserves? Why would we not tap our general fund reserves to close some of these gaps that we consider temporary?
Yeah, and I'll take that one, Mayor. And you said it. This budget does rely on almost $4 million of one-time resources to balance. And so we are balancing this budget in a combination of ongoing cuts as well as one-time. We were fortunate to be able to take advantage of some available capital funds to where we didn't have to tap our PERS reserve or economic anomaly contingency reserve. The reason we're grateful for that is because this fiscal year, 1920, is likely going to require us in November and December to take a big chunk out of that PERS reserve account to balance this year's books. We're exclusively talking right now about the 2021 budget, but we're still living in the 1920 budget, and our revenues in 1920 were significantly hampered by COVID. And in fact, maybe to the same degree as we project them to be in 2021. So we will be taking at the year-end review as part of your CAFR several $1 million out of our existing PERS reserve to balance this year's budget, let alone to deal with 2021. So we're hesitant until we have the fiscal wrap-up to take any more, because we need that piggy bank, call it a rainy day fund, if you will, to close this year's gap.
That being the PERS reserve fund.
Correct.
So again, a general fund reserve, I believe, is 8.66% of our.
833. It's 1 month's worth of reserve. Yeah.
When would we ever tap that?
You know, that would be if next fiscal year, when we go into 21-22, it doesn't. There does not appear to be any clear recovery. We don't have the V recoveries as you described. It becomes a more protracted and a retrenched recessionary environment, which, by the way, could still happen. There are no guarantees that we will see a rapid return of revenue next fiscal year. We're hopeful of that. We're sort of threading the needle in our proposed budget and looking at this as a transition year that we think we can get to structural balance over a 2-year period. And we can talk about Matthew Helmsley's questions in a bit. I'm sure you'd like to do that. But if that doesn't happen and things take a further turn for the worse, let's say we get a COVID spike here next month and the restrictions come back and we see a retrenchment, we want to hold on to as many of those levers as we can until we absolutely need to pull them.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I think I covered much of the concerns of the employees. Well, as you said, let's turn to Matthew Hensley. He was talking about decision package 25. Matthew himself was on our Budget and Finance Commission, and he was talking about the value of continuing this audit, and now is not the time. You answered that pretty much in decision package 25. Did you want to add anything to that?
No, I mean, I think the decision package speaks for itself. I mean, we certainly don't want to have to take that step. I think for us, it's a practical reality. It's not to say that we couldn't bring it back in a following fiscal year. We're working on the audit findings from the previous audit. We're working to implement those. We're continuing that effort. But candidly, and Matthew touches on it, we are reducing our administrative resources even further in this proposed budget, both in finance, HR, other areas, and we're already extremely lean as is. So it's a bit of a bandwidth question as much as it is a $100,000 single year expense question. And hopefully, as things recover, we can put this back into the budget and we can take another crack at it. We think it's a worthwhile effort, as Joe has said many times. You know, we started this, and Matthew covered it. We did this proactively because we thought it would be helpful to look deeper into our operations. But there's only so much we can do with the resources we have available to us, and next year is going to be a challenge.
Well, I think I'm correct in giving credit to the Budget and Finance Commission for that, because that was something that they really, really pushed and followed through and followed up. And I don't know what the bill was, but we are saving $100,000 going forward, and we can still implement some of the recommendations that have already been made to date. Moving on to his second comment about decision package 16, maybe that's something Susan Anderson would like to address, but he talked about shifting the hours. I didn't get it all down what he was talking about, shifting the hours in the North Redondo Library.
Yeah, and as Susan loads up, let me just add that there is a budget response report in your packet tonight as a blue folder that talks about library operations and the cost per hour. We had this referral.
Something's going on. No, big echo there, Mike. I think it's you. I don't know what's going on.
It looks like Susan's firing up here. So
it's been fixed.
Yeah. Anyway, so there is a BRR that speaks to this issue in detail, but certainly Susan can provide you answers to your questions tonight.
Did you hear his question, Susan? Thank you for joining us.
Yes. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Sorry, I also watched this on the TV so that I can make sure the sound is working. So I believe the question was about the hours at the North Branch and the main library in terms of the students after school. Right. And we did give a proposal. The original proposal was that both libraries would close at 6 I have also included some other options where we would shift the hours. Instead of the open hours being 10 to 6, they would be 11 to 7. And that would give an extra hour for those students after school. I mean, generally they're out of the building by about 6, but some of them do linger. And if their parents are working and they need to pick them up after work, that would give them a little bit of extra time. And the story time at Main, the story time at North is at 1 p.m. on Thursday because the current hours are 12 to 8. So if we shifted the North hours to 1 p.m. to 7 p.m., we could just have that story time start at 1:15 and pretty much keep it at the same time. I think that was his concern, that the residents there liked that time and didn't want to have to make it later than that.
Have you kind of gotten that same feedback? I mean, it's just one person writing in.
Well, I mean, unfortunately, we're closed right now, so we're not seeing all of our storytime parents and our students and our other parents right now. But I know that is a very busy story time. I think a lot of times we have heard from residents that they would like a morning story time there, but the library doesn't open until noon, so that's why we haven't been able to provide an earlier one.
Well, it seems staying open later, that 1 hour could be beneficial to the students who are using it, as opposed to having to pack up. Usually, if it's closing at 6, you're packing up at 5:45. So.
Correct, and also we do have a lot of very busy morning story times at Main that start at 10 a.m., but we could shift those to 11, which hopefully would still work out for the parents because it still would be before lunch hour.
Okay, and then turning to the other two comments we got, obviously, this hot issue of Highway Patrol going down third in staff. I asked about this last time, how are we going to fix this? Because it's just, to me, just have this guttural feel, having spent a lot of time in the harbor, that, your boat catches on fire and whenever, and it's a brownout on service, it could be a catastrophe. Where if you had proper response, it wouldn't be. And so, I talked about this with you earlier, Mike, and you said, yes, you could basically run a deficit on the tidelands for a year to keep it going and go from there.
Yeah, your options are it's essentially that. You can not approve the decision package and basically we'll take another $540 roughly $1,000 out of the Tidelands fund balance and keep operations going. You could direct us as part of that to work on solutions to maybe supplement a gap that would never be created by a reduction in staff. Or you can approve the decision package and ask us to figure out ways to supplement the brownout hours, whatever they might be. There is a budget response report that'll come to you on this. We had hoped to get into your blue folder tonight. It's not quite ready, but it will be in your packet. It'll talk about the options that could be implemented from an hours of operation standpoint. So you'll have some material to work with there. But yes, if you can certainly punt this issue if you'd like. Just know that we are effectively increasing our deficit spending in the Tidelands if we are to do that.
I don't think anybody wants to punt it. I think the answer really is to maintain the service and find a way to, maybe work with the beaches and harbor lifeguards, maybe find some other way to, without spending the same amount of money, to staff it.
Yeah.
Because we've got to figure out a way, not just run a deficit, but also look for other ways that we can also fund it and continue the same level of service. I mean, going dark in the harbor that just doesn't sit well with anybody. There's a lot of liveaboards down there, and the people just own boats. It's just, everybody's paying fees for everything, and to think that you're not going to have harbor patrol is just something fundamentally wrong with that. I mean, public safety is number one, and we want to find a way to make that work. So
yeah, and you'll see those options, Mayor, in the BRR that you'll receive in your packet this weekend. So there'll be some description there. And and you mentioned it, and that is one of the ideas. We've talked about it a little bit, is could supplemental service be provided by, another agency? That's something we could look into and explore in more detail.
Yeah.
And we will also provide some accounting of the history. It hasn't always been a 24-hour-a-day operation, so it has evolved and changed over time. So we will include some of that information as well, so you have that perspective.
Yeah, thank you for that, Joe. Looking through my notes, you know, our public works man hours have really taken a hit over the last couple of years, and they're going to take another huge hit. So I'm much more in favor of and I'll just make a general statement because I've read it, and I think, and I've mentioned it, and just so the public knows that there really isn't a big financial difference between holding a position vacant and deauthorizing it. And so I think some of these key positions, and the ones I'm speaking of are in public works, are key because they've taken such a hit, and it'd be much a bigger hit. And the police sergeant, I hate losing, you know, that position. And I know you work closely with Chief Kaufman, but you know, as a resident myself and mayor, I mean, I just, you know, we were looking at ways to fill all these police positions, not deauthorize them. So I would like to hold vacant the public works positions and the police sergeant instead of just deauthorizing them. And to explain to the public what that means is that they're budgeted even though they aren't filled. And at the end of the year, if they never get filled, well, then you get money left over. If you deauthorize a position, then you don't even budget for it. And so that helps you balance your budget. But if you just hold it vacant and you decide to hold it vacant for the year, financially, it's the same as deauthorizing. It just stays as part of your structural budget going forward, so that, you know, cash in, cash out, you earn, you save the money that you would spend if you filled the position, and yet it's still there next year. So it's much harder to come back and say, hey, we're going to add a police sergeant, or hey, we're going to add a park maintenance person, if it's not even in the budget. So I'd much rather, you know, if we're going to have this V-shaped recovery, hopefully, that then when the budget comes around next year, the council at the time can say, okay, we will fill that position. It is important. And particularly that park maintenance supervisor. I mean, the people at Public Works don't have much to look up to, and that supervisor position gives them something to work towards, and that's really, really important. And, you know, I just hate to see, you know, you go down a sergeant, even though I understand the math of how you get a new captain and you don't fill the sergeant position yeah, I just think that some of these positions the council should consider holding vacant versus just deauthorizing. If they need to be deauthorized, then deauthorize them next year. Let's see what happens. But to take them off the books makes it next to impossible, frankly, to come back and add a position. So that's just kind of my general thoughts on the coming budget. And then a little bit more in the weeds. Let's talk about the moorings, okay? I was there when the boat moorings were approved, and we got outside money, and it was like Santa Claus came to town, and we're going to put the moorings in, and then we're going to get all these boats coming in wanting to, you know, moor in Redondo and go to the restaurants and stay at the hotels. And so that never happened. That never happened. We put in 25 or 28 moorings or whatever it was. And now come to find out, we're responsible for maintaining them for 20 years. At the cost of what was $100,000, and it was $60,000, and now you're down to maybe $25,000 a year for moorings that just sit there. I mean, I've been out there plenty of times. I don't think I've ever seen more than 5 boats at the moorings, and yet there's 25 of them. So I would just say on that score that you'd reach out to the state and say, hey, you know, mea culpa, it was a mistake, and for us to have to continue to maintain them is just a huge drain for us. We'd rather reduce it by a certain amount. So it's in your budget response report, and I would favor going back to the state, whoever gave you the grant, Department of Boating and Waterways, and ask them, you know, how we can reduce our ongoing expenditures, because they're just not getting the use, and I'm sure our records show that. Is that a reasonable thing? I kind of stole that from your budget response report.
Yeah, sure. We can do that. I mean, we could even offer to the state that, hey, we won't, you know, we'll pull them out of the water and we'll store them. And, you know, if there's ever a time when we, you know, see demand rise and maybe we can put it back, we can ask them and see how they feel. We certainly don't want to damage our relationship with DBA, as we may be going to them eventually for boat ramp money and the like. But we can explore carefully and see if maybe we can relieve ourselves of some of this burden.
And by next Tuesday, we'll have more recommendations from the Budget and Finance Commission, I take it?
Correct, yes. They're meeting again on the 11th, and believe they're going to spend some time at that meeting talking about their specific recommendations.
Okay. Mike, did they really paint over the white line for the bike path down Torrance Boulevard?
After your question, I drove it today, and they painted over the I don't know who they is, so I don't want to say that. Ted has looked into this, and he'll answer it specifically. But yes, it looks like the interior bike lane line has been striped over. The exterior line closest to the vehicular lane is still there. I don't know, Ted, do you have an explanation?
So everybody knows what we're talking about. The number one project on the bicycle master plan was making a class 2 bike lane down Torrance Boulevard, because they have it in Torrance, and then all of a sudden you hit Redondo and boom, gone. So we finally got the lines painted. I think it made it a class 2 bike lane, I believe. So, and it was fine, and it helped. But then I was driving down a couple weeks ago, and somebody had painted over the white line. So anyway, Ted, you got an update on that?
Yeah, I mean, as Mike said, when the question was asked, I was a little bewildered on it as well. I drove it. The interior line is definitely not a bike lane, because that's too close to the parked vehicles. That may have been something that somebody considered in the past as either an edge line, or maybe to put in the double line type of class 2 facility. We don't have that room. We only have room for a single line that's 12 feet out from the curb. And that line is definitely preserved 12 feet out for the bike lane. It's got the stencil and it's got the arrows on it.
So who painted over the line?
I don't know if somebody else had did it accidentally, but we don't have the 13 feet. That line should have never been there.
Should have never been painted?
Correct. That interior line, again, I don't have the history of when it was painted and blackened over. When you brought up the question yesterday, we saw that. What's really critical is making sure that the exterior line that's 12 feet out from the curb is the outline, the edge line for the bike lane itself.
Okay. All right. One more question, and it goes to the Harbor Commission recommendations, and they've some of them, and let the council respond to them. The first one was suspend contributions to vehicle replacement fund for coming year. I don't quite know what they meant by that, but you wrote them up, and so maybe it's best just to let you explain them.
Sure, I'll take a crack at it. So if you want me to go through all of them one by one?
Yeah, I mean, some take longer than others, but yeah, I mean, they spend time on it, and I think it's important for the council to consider them, and then we come back next week, we won't have to go through them again.
Sure. So the first one was, I believe there's a decision package that talks about contributions to the vehicle replacement fund being reduced by 50%. Their recommendation was to reduce that by 100%, in essence, suspend contributions for the current fiscal year. The second one, decision package 24, the elimination of special event fee waivers. They generally agree with it. They would rather see this be a one-time action rather than ongoing action. They also felt like, should the fiscal climate for the upcoming fiscal year be a little better than what's anticipated, that there might be an event-by-event review to perhaps re-grant those waivers. And they would like to exclude the Christmas Boat Parade from those events from which the fee waivers are being proposed. Decision package 26, contracts and professional services. Again, they generally agreed with the decision package. The one exception they had requested was whether we could continue to operate the Falcon program, perhaps at some reduced level. This was largely due to the fact that, you may recall, when we instituted that program, there was a lot of upfront work to eliminate the harbor, to eliminate pest birds from the harbor, pigeons that were roosting in various locations that had to be removed by hand. And so rather than seeing that condition return all the way back to that level, perhaps if we could just fly the Falcon on a reduced schedule and still have some level of maintenance, that might be preferable. And if you do want some information on that, I do have some background information on that from the Falconer I could give to you.
Let me just ask that, what would be the minimum amount for him to stay engaged?
So he is recommending that the minimum amount would be, right now they fly about 4 days a week. His minimum amount would be roughly to do it 2 days a week. So basically cut the program in half. And what he was suggesting, Mr. Mayor, is that you might take those 2 full days and do them as 4 half days, so that you kind of get those spread out. The other idea he had, which we haven't had a chance to explore, would be, could there be an opportunity to expand the program with some of the other beach communities, and thereby getting some additional cost sharing from, say, Hermosa or Manhattan, that might provide some benefit for Redondo as well. So a couple of ideas there to chew on, but if you want to do it a couple of days a week, it would essentially cut the contract down from, it would cut it in half, roughly from $110,000 down to about $55,000.
Right. Okay.
Then I've lost there we go, the memo.
Long-term parking, motors and.
Yeah, decision package 27, again, general agreement with the decision package. The only request was, if we start to think about automating the parking system in the Redondo Beach Marina parking lot, that we consider people who may be departing for long periods of time, going out for extended cruises, staying at Catalina for long periods of time, things of that nature.
That's not really a council action. I mean, that's something you can work out.
Yeah, that's just an implementation issue that we would work out with whatever program we implement. Decision package 28. Again, you've talked about the mooring maintenance program. I think they would like to ensure that it's being competitively bid, and that the appropriate maintenance of the mooring field is being done in a cost-effective manner. I think your BRR reflects that that's an effort that's going to be undertaken by Public Works. Decision package 15 and 29, we combined these in this particular note just because they're both related to reductions in the fire department budget. Not surprisingly, the Harbor Commission is opposing the reduction in the Harbor Patrol staffing. There was one dissenting vote, and they wanted that noted. And they were, as they discussed this item, recommended that ways you could make up perhaps those costs would be elimination of the Marine Enforcement Unit. In addition, you could possibly see some savings that would be achieved from the closure of Seaside Lagoon, which we'll talk about in a minute. With regard to decision package 15, they didn't discuss the specific actions that were required for the department to achieve their 5% savings, but they generally understood that if the department gets an overall savings, there would be some small cost savings that would accrue to the Harbor Enterprise Fund. Decision package 30, they didn't have any issues with decision package 30. And then decision package 31, you'll see that in the discussion of that decision package, that with the closure of the Seaside Lagoon, there is still a net impact to the Harbor Enterprise of approximately $330,000. And there was some question raised as to if it's closed 100%, or to small groups and maybe some summer camps, why is there still such a large charge being accrued to the Harbor Enterprise? So they were hoping that the council might request some additional detail as to what the composition of that $330,000 is.
Let's do that question right now, and I think it kind of is very similar to, Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center. That's not open. Why don't we just close that and save the money that supposedly we're subsidizing? And Mike, maybe you want to tackle those two issues, because people see Redondo Beach Performing Arts Center requiring a significant subsidy. Well, now the Seaside Lagoon requiring a significant subsidy. They're not open. Why don't we save all this money?
You're right, Mayor. It's a good analogy. Just as the Performing Arts Center is effectively a subset of the Community Services Department and the general fund, in that there are direct expenses to the facility that we track through a mini financial or pro forma, as there are revenues accrued through facility use and reservation. Stephen, you might need to mute.
Somebody's got their key. Okay.
Maybe is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, there we go. So just as there is that the connection there, and what we have with the Performing Arts Center mini financials, we have fixed costs due to staffing that are allocated to that facility. We have part-time staffing costs that are attributed to the nature of the use that typically don't get spent unless the facility is operated. And then we also have internal service fund allocations that are reflected in that mini financial for building occupancy, maintenance, for energy costs, et cetera. The Seaside Lagoon has a similar pro forma. It has direct costs attributed to its summer use for temporary lifeguards and other seasonal employees, but it also has year-round fixed costs for both recreation and maintenance employees who maintain the facility and or think about its future operations even when it's not running. So what the Harbor Commission is citing on is largely driven by the continued subsidy gap there is largely driven by fixed personnel costs that don't just manage the lagoon, but manage other recreation activities in the community or maintenance costs that, while they maintain the lagoon, also maintain other areas of the waterfront. So for us to achieve additional savings there and close that gap and in effect close the facility and cease all costs, we would then have to take the subsequent action to further reduce our full-time filled personnel. And we are not recommending doing that in large part due to the discussions we've already had, where we're hopeful that there will be a return of some level of revenue and that these employees do more than just operate those facilities. That said, we do have other layoffs in our organization that we weren't able to problem solve before.
Okay, thank you for that explanation. Sorry to interrupt, Stephen, but that was an important point.
You muted, Stephen.
I think he's muted.
Okay, here we go. So one last item in this report was the very closing paragraph where the Harbor Commission expressed concern over internal service fund allocation and overhead allocations to the Harbor Fund, the Tidelands, and the Uplands funds. They've observed these charges growing over the years and consuming a larger portion of the fund. And so they were respectfully requesting that the city council reduce the internal service fund and overhead allocation by 15%, which has some symmetry to the cost savings that were being requested of the various city departments. I know you have a BRR that relates to internal service funds, so I won't get into any more detail than that, but that was just a observation that they made and wanted to communicate to you as the policymakers.
And if I could, Mayor, maybe I'll follow up on that. As we've stated, this question has been raised in the past. As we've stated, the enterprise funds, whether it's wastewater or uplands and tidelands or some other fund, the ISFs are calculated in arrears based on actual costs. Eventually, the actions you take with this budget to reduce expenses in the operating departments that contribute to those ISF allocations, those will matriculate through future allocations to the funds and result in the 15% reduction scenario that's being described here. So it takes time, takes a year and a half, in fact, but eventually it will show up in the various enterprise fund budgets.
Okay, well, thank you, Stephen, for running through those. I know the Harbor Commission spent a lot of time on it, and they're going to appreciate us addressing them and keeping them in mind when we go to do the budget next Tuesday. And I think, well, one of the takeaways is try to find a way to continue maintenance of the Harbor Patrol at 3 people, really equivalent of 6 people, and there are 6 positions instead of 4. And the Falcon program, and I don't know, I'm probably forgetting a couple. But anyway, thank you, Stephen. Thank you for that, and thanks for those explanations.
Mayor, I have one more e-comment.
Oh, sure, go ahead.
Okay.
Marcy Klein submits, I oppose the cut to Harbor Patrol. It is a safety issue. As a stand-up paddler and boater, I rely on the Harbor Patrol to respond to our emergencies. If they can't, who will? That concludes the comment.
Thank you. One more question, Mike. I think you can answer this. It had to do with dredging. We're going through the CEQA review, I guess. We have to find settlement placement locations for the dredge spoils. I'd like to read the sample analysis plan myself. So if I could see that, I'd like to see that. But we say there's significant shoaling there. What would happen if we don't dredge the harbor?
Well, and maybe Ted and Andy could weigh on this on more detail, but eventually, if silt continues to build up, we'll have a channel that won't be navigable for boats that need that depth, and it'll be more and more difficult for our marine operations to conduct themselves inside the harbor and particularly in that channel. So we're not.
You talk to the boaters. Let me just say this: you talk to the boaters who use that channel frequently. They say there's no problem. You talk to people who stand up paddle and go out into the harbor. They kind of like that sand out there at a lower tide that kids can walk around on it. And so, the question I'm getting anyway is, why does it need to be dredged?
Well, we certainly haven't dredged it for quite some time. We can continue that effort, but the risk is eventually we have enough shoaling where we have a problem. I don't know, Ted, or if there's a specific point of no return for us, or if we have an obligation under, Army Corps or other, airtime requirements. You feel free to weigh in.
Yeah, I don't know. From an Army Corps perspective, I don't think that's the case. I think from a navigational perspective, yes, we do. We have that obligation. As you said, we haven't dredged it for quite some time. That amount of shoaling has become significant. It could create other issues for us, potentially environmental issues as well. But we think it's a necessity, not just for the navigation, but we know the Army Corps needs to do that when they need to come in and do some repairs. And that's really where we're trying to work that partnership with the Army Corps so we could try to maximize that effort. And, if they're able to lead this charge, they have flexibilities that we don't have as an agency moving forward and asking for their permitting and the state permitting. If they're able to take that lead, they have different leeways with the state in being able to determine where and how to remove the spoils and where to place them. We're doing this in parallel. We're still being hopeful that if the Army Corps can get the budget to do the repairs on the breakwater itself, we know we have to do some access dredging, and we think that effort could be beneficial to both of us at that point.
Yeah, and Mayor, if I could add, we certainly, even as it is, if we continue at our current course, it's going to be several years before the work's actually completed. But, it's a policy call. If you'd rather us, slow this process down or wait some more time, we can do that. It's certainly at your discretion. And I don't know, maybe you'd like, Stephen, I don't know if you have anything to add to this. If you hear regularly from our commissioners on this subject, maybe there's something you'd like to share.
Yeah, we do hear about it. The commissioners consistently ask about when the dredging is going to occur. So Mr. Mayor, I hadn't heard the same comments you've heard. So there does seem to be some interest in the Harbor Commissioner, particularly the voters on the Harbor Commission, in seeing the dredging activity occur. It's certainly something we could, as a policy question, take back to them and talk about an option of not dredging and what that would mean and what it might look like. But I have not heard the same sentiment. Most of the voters on the Harbor Commission are very eager to see the dredging process continue to move forward.
Yeah, I just used to be an engineer, and there used to be much more clear factors that initiated something of this magnitude other than we haven't done it in a long time. That there's a navigable waterway and it's being intruded upon or will be intruded upon, and it takes time and there's a lag of, obviously design and organization and getting everything out there and getting it done. That's all. And I have heard that sort of sentiment. So, and lastly, there's no talk of beach replenishment. The other thing we haven't done in a long time is replenish the beach north of the Topaz Jetty. And it would be an opportune time. I don't know, the volume of sand, if it's significant coming out of the harbor. Maybe there's more sand out of the harbor and you end up taking it somewhere else. But the last time we did the beach replenishment in that area, which gets significant erosion, and you're starting to see it now, was we got it from Biona Creek. Deposits coming out of Biona Creek. They brought it to Redondo. So it might be nice to couple a discussion of dredging with beach replenishment between the Pier and Topaz.
And that's, I think it's a fair question. It's one of our potential deposit locations, and certainly our preference would be to keep our sand in town if we can. Andy, have we studied the sand to know if that's would suffice to be eligible for beach replenishment?
Right. We have gone through that study, and it is part of our process that we go through with the dredge spoils management plan. We did get approval for the offshore location down in south, kind of South Redondo off the beach area, and then a deposit location within the harbor itself that has a lower sea floor than we actually need in the harbor. So we're going to save money by filling that spot in first and then taking the additional outside. We looked at beach replenishment as part of that study. We don't really have the scale of material to make beach replenishment really cost effective at this point. So that's why we store it in the offshore location, so we can save it there for future replenishment projects.
Well, great. That answers that question. A lot of people don't understand. You can take the sand and you can store it in a certain area offshore. That's what they did last time when they brought the sand down from Bayona. They stored it for quite a while before they came in and pumped it up onto the beach.
Right.
So, but that answers that question, Andy. I appreciate that there doesn't seem to be enough volume of shoaling sand in the harbor to do significant beach replenishment there.
Yeah, and just back to the navigation question, we do have two areas where we have shoaling. One is against the outer breakwater, and the other is against the inner breakwater right adjacent to the pier, and that leads into Basin 3, and that is definitely a navigation issue there. So we would definitely want to address that without much further delay. That channel is getting skinnier and skinnier almost as you watch it. So navigation is definitely a big issue there, and as Stephen mentioned, the comments and feedback we've gotten back so far, at least from the boating community, is that it's also becoming an issue at the outer breakwater. So,
okay. So then we'll go ahead and move ahead with that then. Okay, great. I mean, that answers those questions. I really appreciate that. With that, I'll move on to Councilmember John Grant. Sorry it took so long, you guys, but that was important stuff, and I think the Harbor Commission will appreciate it. Councilmember Grant.
Thank you. First, I want to say, Mike and Joe, thank you very much. The CIP looks terrific. Ted, Andy, wonderful job in getting all those projects done. 17 projects, $10 to $12 million worth of stuff done last year. Probably double that looking at this next year. That's terrific. What I wanted to do is make a motion to close the public testimony and continue the public hearing to June 16th.
We got one more comment showing from Councilmember Lowenstein, but I can take a second for that. Let him talk, and then
Second.
it seems like Councilman Horvath beat you there, Lauren. So there's a motion from Councilmember Grant, second from Councilmember Horvath. Before I take a vote, why don't we let Councilmember Lowenstein
Sounds great.
talk?
Yeah, real briefly, regarding the library, I'm a little hesitant to close it on Monday completely, being that, Sunday and Monday, and I'm wondering if we could do half days, like a half day on Monday and a half day on another day, like Friday, that's not as busy. I know it's a little bit confusing for people with the different hours staggered, but I would rather have half days, 2 half days, and 1 full day, another full day completely gone. And I'm all in favor of trying to save the hours for the kids programs, the readings. So I think that's great. I think it's great to do that. That's all I wanted to say. If we can be a little bit flexible, if it still allows us to save the money, but maybe allows us to operate, I don't know. I don't know what you think, Susan.
One of the reasons I put Friday as an option in there is because Friday is probably our least busy day in terms of students using the library, and also is generally fairly quiet, although Thursday has the least door count. Mm-hmm. So there would be an option where we could do half days that I could come back with. I mean, I'd have to think about that. Maybe.
Maybe what we can do is amend the budget response report and have an addendum to it, because Susan's going to need to kind of think through the staffing and,
Yeah, and if it poses problems for work schedules and stuff like that, let us know. Because, if people say, well, I don't really want to come in for 4 hours, instead of 8 hours, those are the kind of things that I'd love to hear. And the other thing is, I think it's great that we extended to 7, because there's a lot of people that don't get home from work before 6. So they're stuck with going on Saturday. That's it.
Yes, I agree. And also, I think that prevents maybe some kids from just being left outside, while they wait for their parents, which could be a safety issue as well. I wanted to also, you had mentioned in the last council meeting, you had meetings that would be occurring, that might be occurring after hours if we closed early. And one thing I forgot to mention is that with city council and commission meeting in the main library, there's not going to be a whole lot of opportunity for other meetings in there for as long as council and commission are using the main library. I forgot to mention that when you brought that up.
So I'm gonna have to find a place for my community meetings, or they're gonna have to continue on Zoom. Maybe I'll do that. So, okay, thank you. That's it for me.
Okay, great. There's a motion on the floor in a second. I'll take a roll call vote. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grand.
Aye.
And Councilmember Imdy.
Aye.
Okay, so we're basically continuing the public hearing for the budget to next Tuesday. I'll encourage anyone from Budget and Finance Commission as well as the Harbor Commission to show up and help clarify some of these issues. It'd be very helpful when we're discussing your recommendations that somebody from the commission can clarify them on top of what we receive in writing, because it's very helpful, it's very educational, and there's always questions. And Stephen Proud does a great job answering them, and Marty, but it just, there's no substitute for one of you guys showing up and explaining more of the thoughts, especially if it's the chairman who oversaw the meeting. Okay. And with that.
And Mayor, Council, did we have a motion to receive and file the budget response reports?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll make a motion to receive and file the budget and response reports.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grand.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Okay, great. Thank you, Joe. Sure. All right. So, with that, I guess we'll move on to referrals to staff by our council and mayor. Councilmember Nierenheim, you have any referrals to staff?
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion, actually. In light of everything that's been going on with the current protests and reviewing our use of force policies, engaging with our communities, I'd like to make a motion to review our use of force policies and engage our community. Take the mayor's pledge that we have. I've gotten multiple emails on, and so we can be proactive here and move forward on what we're doing here in the police department regarding our use of force policies, and that we can have a council discussion at a later time after we have reviewed and engaged the community.
Yeah, I would certainly support that. And I meant to mention that I took the mayor's pledge just to examine our use of force policies within the police. It's not the Can't Wait for 8 campaign, but it is an opportunity for us to look at our use of force policies and engage the public in that and get a report back from staff. So, yeah, I'm hoping, yeah, exactly. Somebody that the council votes to go ahead and do that. I think it's timely, and I think it'll address a lot of the concerns from the public, and it'll engage the public and engage the residents in the police in a healthy conversation, regardless of what changes come out of it. So,
I'll second that.
Can you explain that motion again? Because it was a talking motion. I don't know if it was to agendize it. The use of force policy is and has been on the city website. So I didn't understand the predicate about engaging the community as opposed to making a motion to agendize it.
Well, we want to go out. I want to go out and ask community, include the community in a broad discussion, whether it's from the recent emails that have come in to requests that have come in, usage of force, the policies that we have, currently review them and come back with a staff report that explains the input, the questions we've gotten, the responses we've given, the use of force policy as a whole, the
That's kind of it. I can explain it, Mike. It's really
just I would just like a motion. Like I understand the rationale behind it, but we can't address something that's the motivation behind it. Is it? Do you want to address for council discussion our use of force policies? That is a motion I would
review of our use of force policies and agendize a discussion on that. Exactly.
Yeah, that's simple enough.
And Todd, was that your understanding?
That was my understanding as well too. I'm getting inundated by emails exactly that, and I know it's on the website. I talked to Chief Kaufman about it, but I don't think a lot of people know what our use of force policies are. I didn't know until I had to look through it as well. So
it's well worthy of a discussion in my view.
I'm not saying it wasn't, but when you got into the community outreach, I didn't know if staff was going to be responsible for that, or the communications you get. I may or may not see them. So the discussion, I can completely understand. What date would you like for that?
Well, I don't know what the availability is of staff. June is obviously done. July, we're kind of slow. So if you want to do it in July, or, August, we're moving over back to be in person in August, scheduled to be in the new library, in the library center. So by the end of August.
I would do it sooner than that, you guys. I mean, it really just amounts to the chief coming up and explaining what their use of force policies are and what potential changes. I mean, the state's talking about banning things, and he'll be able to fold in what he's hearing and what they're already doing. And, much of actually what they said with the Can't Wait for 8, we're already doing. So I think it would be helpful to do this a lot sooner than the end of August, for the chief to be able to explain.
Is it something that we can do, Joe? Is this something we can do by the end of July for a report like this?
Well, can I just say, since I don't see the chief chiming in, can you have by the end of August, and we'll certainly try and expedite it if the chief can, if they're on the verge of making changes at the state level, then that will make it much simpler if we know what that is going to be, because it keeps changing daily. So there he is. I didn't want to speak for you. Can you do the end of July?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we're constantly reviewing things right now as we speak. So there will be subsequent changes by July. There's probably going to be some legislation that's introduced that's going to force some changes. So yeah, no problem having this conversation.
Okay, and that was the call I was referencing earlier that I had to have him put. Oh, never mind.
I would say you have to wait till the end of August. If something comes up, chief, and you think it's an appropriate time, then I would, give it to city manager and just get it on the agenda whenever you think it's appropriate. So
we'll shoot for July.
Okay.
Unintended.
Do you want us to compare and contrast? Say the simple 8 is what is many of the comments I imagine you're receiving.
Yeah, we're all seeing them. Everybody's seeing them.
So we can talk about what we've adopted, what is currently on its way to being adopted, and we would recommend not adopting.
What we currently are doing. So we'll hold it all in this one. And by the way, I'll tell the public, all this is very front and center and on our website. You go to the police department website and just surf around a little bit, and you will find it. You will find the uses of force incidences. You'll find the complaints. You'll find how they were disciplined and then closed out and not closed out. It's all right there, and most departments don't have that. So it was very impressive when Chief Kaufman walked me through that. I was unaware of it. So anyway, I guess there's a motion and a second. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Gran.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
That'll be something for you to talk about, Christian, on your call. We're having a discussion. So anyway, Councilmember Lowenstein, did you have anything?
I don't, but I neglected at the beginning of the meeting to thank the police department for all the work they've been doing over the last 2 weeks. It's amazing all the work you guys are doing. I know that, 12-hour days, we're all very appreciative, as well as you guys intervening in that assisted to prevent a suicide that was across from the police station and the detective station. So thank you for that, Chief Kaufman. Please pass the best on to your team. We really appreciate it. I know I've stopped a few of the officers and thanked them for all the extra hours they're putting in. So that's it for me. Nothing else in terms of referral.
Councilmember Horvath.
No, thank you.
Councilmember Grant.
Thank you.
Councilmember MD.
No, thank you.
Okay. Well, I guess that's it, folks. Unless I'm missing something, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So move.
Second.
Okay. Councilmember Nierenheim.
Aye.
Councilmember Lowenstein.
Aye.
Councilmember Horvath.
Aye.
Councilmember Grant.
Aye.
And Councilmember MD.
Aye.
Great. Good seeing everybody. Have a good night. And we'll be in close contact. And we'll get a budget next week.
Perfect. You guys later.
Move on. Okay. Thanks, everyone.